Welcome, everybody. This is Omar Serrato with the Tilted Lawyer podcast, joined by Ileana clone Rosa. And today, at popular request, we are going to be in real time preparing for the hypothetical trial of Nicole Kessinger and her involvement in the massacre of Christopher Watts' family. We're going to go over all of the evidence, and we're going to prep this the way that we would in one of our normal trials, and you're going to see our process and the way that we think, the evidence that we're going to pull in, what's important, what's not important. You're going to want to stick around for this one. It's going to be good. We'll see you in a few. Whatever you might be going through and wherever you might be, this is Omar Serrato with the Tilted Lawyer podcast. I'm here to take your mind off of things. Yes, I'm an attorney. No, I'm not giving you legal advice. We're going to sit and talk like people, as these are the candid thoughts of one practicing attorney, and it's after hours. So have a seat, feel free to have a drink, and join me. Let's get started. All right, let's get to work. All right, so Ileana, this is the assignment. You are working for a hypothetical law firm of the Tilted Lawyer Law and Associates, or whatever. And Nicole Kessinger has come to us to represent her, or we are the prosecutor's office, and we are contemplating the charges of which we are going to bring Nicole. First off the bat, we have to come up with some hypothetical charges for her. We've discussed over the course of the last couple of weeks a lot of the evidence that is out there, some of the discovery. And here's the problem with the case like this. We have to contend with the fact that this case has been out there since 2018. People have had almost 6 years to ruminate over every single little detail on the case. If you read the discovery, there's all of these people that called in and offered clues, and people out there, you see them in our comments. They have these conspiracy theories that have developed from other YouTubers that are throwing crazy stuff out there. We can't focus on those things. We have to focus on as if this was a actual trial, and we're only allowed to present evidence that is relevant, that we can prove. It cannot be based on conjecture. For example, there is a conspiracy theory out there that, and I'm going to butcher this, but to paraphrase it, it was something about there was concern that there might be some kind of an explosion because of the bodies and the oil tankers and removing them or leaving them too long. It somehow affected the case. I don't know anything about that conspiracy, but there was commenters that have offered that up. And to be honest with you, I haven't had a lot of time to look into it in preparation for today's show because I had very specific instructions for today. So I'm not going to go into any of that. Here's what we got to figure out. What are the hypothetical charges that we're going to have Nicole Kessinger face? We're going to take this hypothetical from this angle, from this understanding. Christopher Watts has confessed to the murder of his wife and his 3 children. That part of it is already done. He's already locked up. He's never going to get out. I thought about going through the exercise of potentially taking up his case. He has had talks with other criminal defense attorneys to try to throw out his confession and get himself out of prison. I'm not interested in that. I'm not entertaining that. He doesn't have a bat's chance, and what's the expression? A shot in hell? What's the hell in a bat? Whatever. He doesn't have much of a chance to win that appeal. I do that a lot, you know. I think it annoys people. I go into these weird hypotheticals that I hear, and then they don't come out correctly.
I'm worse. I know them in Spanish, and I try to translate them, and they don't make any sense.
Well, I don't even have that excuse. So he doesn't have a chance in hell getting out of prison. I'm just going to assume his confession is going to stand. What we have to decide is whether or not Nicole Kessinger was involved, to the extent and degree of which she was involved, and what we can prove. What I could 100% confidently bring her up on charges for is conspiracy to commit murder based on what I've seen in the evidence. So here's a caveat. If you've never done a criminal trial, have you ever done a criminal jury trial? I don't think you have.
No, I have not.
So I've done them. The way that it works in a criminal trial is whatever comes out in evidence, the district attorney has the right to amend charges up to the point of verdict. Take a moment to consider our show sponsor, Aura, Internet Security. If you have been following my Instagram or my Facebook, you would know that we have been attacked by hackers, and both of those accounts have been deleted, ripped off of the face of the earth. It happens. Hacking is a real thing that occurs. And let me tell you something else. Data brokers will sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. And you might not believe it, but your full name, your email address, your home address, your health records, your relatives, your children, your spouse, all of it is out there. I am a lawyer. I do my own background checks. I pay good money for my background checks, but it's starting to get to the point where you could Google anybody's name and some kind of a secondary source of information, such as a birth date or email address or something, and you will find that you can Google all of this information. It's just out there for people to exploit. That's why I have decided to use Aura. The sponsor of today's video on Aura they show me specifically which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. And I'll tell you what, I had them when I signed up for their services. They showed me there was 3 separate internet brokers that were selling my information that they automatically got rid of for me by taking the initiative to opt out of those memberships. So cleaning up my information, cleaning up your information, and not only reduces the amount of spam that I get, it protects me from hackers that could use my information to help them access my social media accounts. Highlight, if you've been a follower of my Instagram or my TikTok, or well, not my TikTok, but my Facebook, you will know that those accounts no longer exist. It had nothing to do with anything. I had a 20-year-old Facebook account. It's completely gone because of hackers, spammers, whatever you want to call it. It's gone. So it protects me from that. It protects your social media accounts, your bank accounts, other sensitive information. Also, Aura does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. I get other features like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more without having to download several different apps. It's really easy to set it up. I did it, matter of fact, this morning. It took me about a couple of minutes to get me all set up and protected. And you get it all at a really easy, affordable price. But beside that, you might already have some of these tools already, but not having Aura is literally like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. People just walk right in and take all of your stuff. I value my privacy. I value yours. You can go right now to aura.com/tiltedlawyer. To start your 2-week free trial, no cost to you. It's going to be linked below in the description. Go in and sign up for your free 14-day trial and experience all of the protection that comes with Aura Internet Security. It's powered by artificial intelligence. You're not going to regret it. Go on in and check them out. Well, as soon as up until the point that the jury starts deliberating. Yes. So long as the new charges do not pose some kind of undue burden to the defense counsel. For example, all of a sudden, we're sitting here for a murder trial. Now they want to amend the charges to include like sexual assault when that was never a thing. They had no opportunity to prepare for that. So as long as the new charges are related to the old charges, you can do that. So we're going to operate under the assumption that right now I don't have enough evidence to confidently put on a competent case against Nicole Kessinger for her active role in actually committing the murders, but I will bring her up on charges for conspiracy to commit murder insofar as there was a plan, there was motive, and there was a plan to dispatch of individuals who were dispatched of, and she played a role in the furtherance of it. That's what we got to prove.
Now, remind me, because I don't know if I'm confusing California law with Puerto Rican law.
This is going to be federal law. And so we're not in California. This is a federal case.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I don't know why I keep remembering that there was some rule where you can change the charges as long as they are not like a worst, or you can go less but not worse.
Oh, the sentencing floor.
Yeah.
Well, the way that it works is if there is evidence that comes out, like some surprise witness came out and like broke the whole case open, which implicates on further charges, that would not have reasonably been known.
Of course, yeah.
then you could amend the complaint. But what you can't do is sit on that for months. And then all of a sudden it's not going the way that you hoped. And now you want to bring in this new charge based on evidence that you had way back then.
Okay.
You can't do that
That
at the
was
state level or the federal level.
like, I remember something in one of those tests that I like in my mind, it's like, I can go down, but not up except for this. So that's,
Yeah. I mean, it all just,
it makes sense.
it's meant to protect against undue surprise.
Exactly.
Because a criminal has a right to defend themselves. They have the right to confront witnesses, the right to know what they're charged with, and a right to a speedy trial. And all of a sudden you're sitting on this other information. You have to disclose everything to the defendant. Otherwise you're looking at Brady violations and potential other stuff that could happen. So let's just assume right now that, in full disclosure, I don't know the case as well as some of you in the comments very clearly. I have not spent the last 6 years ruminating over this case. This has been a 2-week journey for me. I've developed my own theories just on stuff that I've seen from the actual discovery. And some of you are going to write in. I could already hear it. I'm already reading it in my mind in the future that the discovery was incomplete and it was incorrect and there's so many holes and all. I know that. I know there are holes. But the discovery is what is tangible that I have to work with, and it's not based on conjecture. It's based on the actual investigation. There's going to be things that you're going to hear me call for in evidence that is not in the discovery. And those are some of the things that if I was prepping for a trial, that I would subpoena those records. For example, the cell phone pings. Why are we relying on cell phone pings? Why don't we just get the GPS data from her phone? Or Google Maps, Waze. There's a number of different apps that track GPS. I would want to see those records. And if it's a moot point because she had her phone off, well, that's really important information because it goes to possibly implicate her of a plan to hide her phone activity, which leads to guilt. That's like the Murdaugh thing that happened in his case. So just know that I know that we're not operating off of perfect evidence. If there was perfect evidence out there, this would not be a hypothetical trial. It would be an actual trial. There has been a lot of criticism on the part of the district attorney in this case, Rourke. I forget his first name, but he went on a podcast with his wife. And somebody in the comments had wanted me to review and get my thoughts on that. I haven't had the time to do any of that. But I know kind of the tenor of what he was saying. He was violently speaking out at people that wanted Nicole Kessinger prosecuted, saying, you guys didn't know anything. And he's just basically saying, I'm smart, you guys are dumb. They're
That's the prosecutor?
junior detectives. Yeah, the DA in this case. So I haven't listened to him. I've never heard that podcast. I don't know exactly what he says. So if I'm mistaken, please be gentle. I'm just saying it makes a lot of sense that he would take that position because oftentimes as attorneys, we have to defend why we did what we did all the time. So in a high profile case like this, you have the overwhelming general public of the world asking you why you did not investigate Nicole Kessinger further, and in essence calling you incompetent in your investigation. And as a district attorney, you're going to be a little defensive, especially if you've been listening to it for 4, 5, 6 years now. And so, again, haven't listened to it, but it doesn't surprise me that he's pushing back so heavily on this. So I'm taking him out of the equation. He doesn't have to do anything. I'm taking up the charge. I am of the position, after our last couple of episodes, that Nicole Kessinger is guilty of something. What I'm unclear of is whether or not she's guilty of actual murder or if it's just the planning of the murder. And that's what we're going to kind of get to. So right off the bat, this case is on my desk. I'm envisioning a 3 to 6 week trial already. We have to come up with our theories of the case, opposing theories of the case. I don't know what your approach to trial preparation is, Ileana, but the way that I've been taught to do it and the way that I've done it is I always come up with my closing arguments first, which is what I want to prove. And then in the process of doing that, I come up with my opening statements because it drives my investigation. If I want to prove these things, if I'm saying this is true, I can't just say that. I got to show the jury why that is. And so my hypothetical or rough opening and closing statements drive my investigation.
Okay.
How do you approach it?
I usually go into like the specific law, like what do I need to prove?
Yeah.
And I make a list, like bullet points. This is what I need to prove. And then I start writing down under each thing that I need to prove, what's the evidence that I have to support or against me to prove that point. Then I go to the closing. And of course, at the end, like I do the opening. I guess the opening, it makes a lot of sense to do it last once you have everything, because it's like the introduction of what you have already like prepared for the trial. So.
Well, here's my theory behind it. I have a framework for what I want to prove, but it's a rough draft. And so it changes as my evidence changes, right? So, but you're right. We got to prove the elements. So what are the elements? 18 U.S. Code Section 1117, conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to murder. This is the statute. If two or more persons conspire to violate sections 1111, 1114, 1116, 1119, basically murder, of this title, and one or more of such persons do any overt act to affect the object of the conspiracy, each shall be punished by imprisonment for any term of years or for life. So this isn't an automatic life sentence, but there are certain sentencing guidelines we got to commit. Here's what we got to commit. Well, here's what we've got to prove. There was two people, Nicole, Chris.
Yes.
Conspired to violate these specific sections. One of them is murder, to end the lives of Shanann and possibly the children. And any one of the two acted affirmatively to make that happen.
The overt act.
And one or more of such persons do any overt act to affect the object of the conspiracy. They don't have to actually be successful. They purchased a gun at Walmart.
Exactly.
And lied in wait, waiting for somebody to come home, something like that. In this case, the object or the agent of the conspiracy is Christopher Watts. Unequivocally, we don't have to prove that. It's already been proven through his confession. Regardless of whether or not you think his confession is true or not, we're going to rely on that at trial. Matter of fact, I'm going to make a motion in limine to take judicial notice that element 2 of this statute has been proven. I don't have to prove that anymore by virtue of Christopher Watts' confession and subsequent conviction, and he's sitting in jail right now. So element proved. Now, all we got to prove is that there was a plan to do this.
To do that, yeah.
That's all we got to prove. The burden is on us or the prosecutor. Well, okay, are you going to defend Nicole? I need to know.
I don't think so.
All right.
It's so hard for me to take the defensive position in criminal cases.
Well, I'm used to it. Here's what it would look like. This is a hypothetical opening statement. You just got to let me cook for a minute. Let's just say I'm criminal defense attorney. I got to imagine what the defense attorney is going to say in response to my proof, my evidence, my case in chief. And it might go something like this. Nicole Kessinger. She was not a morally outstanding person by any measure. She's guilty of adultery. She is guilty of falling in love with a man and carrying on a relationship with a man who was actively married to a woman with children. But that's all she's guilty of. The prosecution wants you to believe, on the strength of a 111-minute phone call that occurred the night before the murders, as you're going to hear in the evidence, and on the strength of faulty cell phone pings that came about from discovery that are inherently flawed, that conflates basically to conspiracy to commit murder. You're not going to see any evidence whatsoever of any overt planning on her part You're not going to see any conspiracy or any evidence that she had any communication with Christopher Watts for the sole purpose of planning the murder of a family. You're going to see evidence of her speaking with interrogators. And I will admit, you will see. And she is very ashamed for me to have to stand up here and tell you that you're going to see her be untruthful with the police with respect to her relationship and the depth of it with Christopher Watts. It's not an easy thing to be confronted with the prospect that people know that you've had an illicit affair with anybody, let alone was the main object of affection for a man who ultimately murdered his family, as he's already confessed, Mr. Christopher Watts. What she's guilty of is being ashamed of her affair and trying to hide it in what she told the police. Did she delete evidence? The evidence is going to show, yes, she did. But it's no different than any one of you who has ever had a relationship that has gone sour to a point where it makes you so physically ill because of what they did or whatever happened that you don't want any traces, and she deletes it. That is not proof of conspiracy to commit murder. The evidence is going to show that they had this 2-month whirlwind relationship. She may have had hopes and aspirations towards a future with Christopher Watts, but what she did not have, and what the defense, what the prosecution is not going to be able to prove, is that she played any role in the planning or the carrying out of what that monster Christopher Watts did. Hypothetical opening statement. What the DA is going to say. How would you respond to that, Ileana?
Oh, God.
I should give you the floor.
I give it back to you. I mean...
All right. So, hypothetical opening statement.
For the DA.
The DA, well, Nicole Kessinger's defense attorney has a tough job.
Yes.
It's difficult having to defend somebody that is so clearly aligned with evil that you're going to come to this courtroom and try to convince you, 12 fine people, insult your intelligence and say that, hey, the fact that they had a 111-minute phone conversation the night before the murders, that they were in constant phone communication the day of the murders when people were actively looking for the missing persons in this case and ultimately the victims of this case, didn't amount to some form of planning and knowledge on her part of a plan and a conspiracy to commit murder. I believe, and the evidence is going to show, that you 12 folks are smarter than that. You're going to hear that in the course of this 3.5-hour interview where Nicole tried to convince FBI agents that there was nothing in regards to her involvement or knowledge of Shanann Watts, of the children, of all of these things, of the depth of his relationship to his wife, her lies were so egregious. And why is that? Because anybody having an affair, of course, there's going to be some embarrassment. But if the person you're in a relationship, as the evidence is going to show here, if the person you're in a relationship with goes off and commits murders, most people in that scenario are 100% cooperative with the police. There's no need to hide anything. If there was never any plans, here's all my text messages, here's all the pictures, here's all the communications. What did you talk about for 111 minutes the night before? Oh, well, we talked about going to Italy because Chris had told me that we were going to have some kind of relationship afterwards and we were planning for the future. And what we were not doing was planning to commit any murders. And if he did that, that was completely on his. And she did try to tell investigators that. The problem with that, as you're going to see the evidence display, is that she went back and deleted all of the evidence from her cell phones, save for a few text messages here and there, thinking that the FBI couldn't recover it. And she's going to be confronted with those lies, and she's not going to have good explanations for why she did that. Aside from that, you're going to see evidence of a surveillance video of what appears to be a woman that resembles Nicole Kessinger, down to the long hair, to the body structure, to the purse that she was seen in the interrogation room just days later on the night of the murders. Why is that significant? Because you're also going to hear evidence of cell phone pings. And you're going to hear all about the efficacy of that evidence. And you're going to hear all about what it means when your cell phone pings at a specific tower. And you're going to hear that there's only been a few occasions in the history of her cell phone data where her phone ever pinged at the Watts residence. On 2 occasions, on her admitting that she was at the Watts residence home prior to the murders, but more importantly, at 6:16 a.m., the morning of the murders. Why was she there? Was it just an error? I don't know, but the evidence is going to show, juxtaposed with the surveillance footage of her image walking out of the Watts garage for whatever reason, that she was unequivocally there. And if she was there at those times, she was there when the murders were committed. And if she didn't commit the murders herself, then she aided in the cleanup and the disposal of evidence. And how do we know that she cleaned up and disposed of evidence? Because you're going to hear testimony from officers coming in to say that when they entered the home, the house reeked of cleaning chemicals. There were fresh vacuum lines on the entire carpet. Everything was spick and span. There was obvious disposal of evidence that went on. Never mind the destruction of electronic evidence and so forth. So this is where, before I ramble on too far, because we only got so much time, that is a preview of the opening statements. So DA's relying 100% on circumstantial evidence. All the defense has to do is offer a reasonable explanation to the alternative and basically throw Nicole under the bus. Yeah, she's a bad person. She had an affair with a married guy. But that doesn't make her guilty of a conspiracy to commit murders. That's the defense. The DA is going to say, BS with all of that. Look at all of this other stuff, And then, we'll talk about some of that. So let's get into it. Prospective witnesses in this case. And this is not an exhaustive list. So when we took on this task, it was literally, what's today? Thursday? It was on Tuesday when I called us, hey, we're going to do a preparation for a hypothetical trial of Nicole Kessinger. When I prep for a trial like this, and I'm envisioning a trial like this running probably 3 to 6 months, or not, 3 to 6 weeks, there was months of preparation that occurs. I can't get this done in a day. Matter of fact, if I was on the case, I'm like, Your Honor, respectfully, I'm going to need a continuance of at least 60 to 90 days to prep this, and that. There's discovery. There's all these, defense motions, evidence. So this is 100% not how it normally goes. So our analysis and our preparation of this is not complete by any stretch, but this is just kind of a snapshot on how we begin prepping for the case. So the opening statements serve one purpose. They kind of set the tone for what we are looking for in terms of presentation of evidence. We kind of know what the defense is going to say. Their arguments are obvious. So we have to get something really good. It's got to be so compelling. The whole speech about circumstantial evidence. The evidence, and the DA is going to give this speech to the jurors during a jury selection. They always come up with the famous, hey, I don't have to put on a perfect case. Just because I have the burden of proving my case beyond a reasonable doubt doesn't mean that I have to prove to you with a 100% perfect case. It just has to be such that there is not a reasonable explanation that exists to the alternative. And that's all I have to do. And even if I don't have any direct evidence to show you, what I will show you is evidence that, hey, I walked into a house, and when I walked out into the house, sun was shining, it was bright blue skies, it was a little bit cloudy, it was also a little bit windy. And then when I walked out of the house, approximately 90 minutes later, everything was soaking wet, there was clouds in the sky was gray, the houses and everything was surrounding was soaked with what appeared to be rain. My logical conclusion from that, circumstantially, is that it rained. Did I see that it rained? No. Do I have any video footage of that rained? No. But there's only one reasonable explanation, and I don't think the neighbors just took a hose to just decide to make everybody believe that it rained in this neighborhood of whatever. You get my point. So that is the directive of the district attorney. You're going to hear that speech if you've ever been on jury selection. You hear it all the time. I hate that story so much, but it is what it is. So let's get into it. I want to talk to, if I'm the DA, Officer Matthew James. For the explicit purpose, he's going to come in to testify that there was no defensive injuries on Chris.
Okay.
Is that an important fact? I don't know if it's important or not, but I think that it's important to know that the jury is going to be confronted with a fact pattern that suggests that Christopher Watts strangled his wife. And in his discussion, which is nonsensical, but he says it, she just laid there and let herself be strangled. Is there any truth to that statement, or did it happen a different way? Is it possible that she was drugged? We're going to need to see the toxicology results, right? That's something that we're going to be subpoenaing. Autopsy results, looking for marks around the neck and cause of death and those kinds of things. What, did he have help with perhaps another person that was in the house? Because on the surveillance footage that we're going to bring out, it appears that there was a woman that closely resembled Nicole Kessinger. We're going to pull up that video in a very short while. So I think it's important circumstantially, to leave nothing to chance, that they should just know Shanann Watts was not the type of woman that was going to lay down and let herself be choked to death, presumably knowing that her babies were in danger. What I don't know for sure is the order of the deaths. We don't know that. There's been a lot of speculation. We have Christopher Watts's confession. I've heard one theory out there in the thousands of comments that I've read at this point, that Chris tried to smother the kids first and thought that they were dead, and then moved on to Shanann. And then after it was done, the children didn't actually die. Bella goes into the room and says, "What's wrong with mom?" after this unsuccessful. Do I believe that happened? No, it's just one of the theories. The point being that I can't and I will not be able to say to a certainty the order of operations here. What I can speak to is, obviously the family is gone and there's manner of death. So Officer Matthew James is going to come in and he's going to say that approximately 22:05 hours, 10:05, the day of the investigation, he took photos of Chris while he was in an interview room at the Frederick Police Department. And the photos I took of him were of his shirt off, his hands, head, neck, and face. There was a red mark on the left side of his neck that he identified as a mosquito bite. There was also a red mark on the front of his neck. I didn't observe any obvious other injuries to Chris's body. And then there's photographs. Obviously, those are going to be displayed. This is probably a 20 to 25 minute direct exam, and maybe a 15-minute cross. And so you're looking at this guy maybe taking up an hour or two of the court's time. And this is how we get to like 3 6-week trials, because all these people, they take it's a long process of going through all of them. Is there anything else that I noted here? No, but he's there specifically to say that there wasn't any injuries on Chris. Small piece of the puzzle, but that's what we have. I want Officer Coonrod to come in. He's going to speak to the discovery of the bodies. He's going to come in and testify that he responded to an Anadarko oil well site near Rogan, Colorado, and he has the GPS coordinates marked to search for evidence, and that's the famous oil tankers that we all know by now. And upon arrival, I was advised by the Colorado Bureau of Investigations that they had collected several pieces of evidence, placed them in evidence bags. There's hair samples from the thief hatch on top of an oil battery, parts of a rake, a bed sheet, and other things that had been collected. These items were given to Detective Baumhover. We started excavating a potential dig site about 100 feet from the oil tank battery. The dirt appeared to have been freshly dug. At around 11 o'clock, we located the body of an adult female, which we believed to be Shanann, and it ultimately was Shanann. The body was decomposing at that point, and she'd been there less than 24 hours, which is wild to me. But the body was decomposing and removed at about 12:10 a.m. The body was in a shallow grave. The buttock was approximately 8 inches from the top of the burial site. A Weld County coroner took possession of the body. Photographs were taken. So we're going to bring him in to talk about that.
Was this during the summer?
It was in August. Yeah, so it was summer.
Sense.
Yeah. This was on August 15th. So that would have literally been, she was dispatched with approximately 20 hours prior. 20 to 18 hours. And already, I don't know how hot it was that day, but
Probably very hot for her to be decomposing already.
yeah, but it happens very quickly.
Yes.
I mean, they've done science on this. If there's heat and there's moisture, shallow grave, it had already started. And so within, less than 24-hour period, we are going to bring in Catherine Lines. She's going to talk about the cleanup of the murder scene. And what she's going to say is on August 14th, at approximately 11:45 in the state of Colorado, county of Weld, town of Frederick, she responded to the police department and met with the search and rescue team and their canines for search efforts regarding the disappearance of Shanann Watts and her 2 children. After being briefed on the situation, I, along with Officer Prez and these other officers and rescue dogs, I responded to the home of the missing individuals, but this is what I needed to say. Upon entry to the home, I immediately noticed a strong odor of cleaning chemicals. The home appeared spotless, and the carpet had noticeable vacuum lines. As we walked to the kitchen living room area, I observed that the television was on a sports show while standing by the back slider door. Deputy Cash inquired about the little girl's shoes on the back porch. Chris said that the girls wore them to a pool party and blah, blah, blah. The important part is there was obvious cleanup, either Chris or Shanann or both. So we have to establish how this all went down. We got to bring in the evidence. Here's Shanann. She's on the footage. She's coming in. At some point, she was dispatched with, and then they were taken out. We got their surveillance of when at least Christopher Watts' truck is leaving the location. They found the bodies where, at the Anadarko tank facilities. And it appears that somebody tried to clean up and hide the evidence. That would be the implication. Now, she didn't say hide the evidence, and she's not going to say that on the stand. We have to connect the dots with the jury. And so, among other things, she's going to talk about stuff about Chris's facial expressions rarely changing. He seemed to smile or smirk inappropriately, displaying a lack of empathy. Chris lacked eye contact and appeared to be nervous. He was escorted through the entire house. He showed us each room, including the laundry room, where he dug through dirty laundry and again mentioned that he was doing his kids' laundry. When they brought in the canine units, it's important to note that they needed a test piece of clothing for them, and it couldn't have been contaminated with other scents. And so they wanted something that was fresh that he hadn't touched recently. And the story out of his mouth was, "Oh, I've touched everything." And so I don't know what you're going to get out of that. So you could form your own conclusions with that. But again, it's easy to convict Chris. We have to tie this to Nicole. And so you could imagine why this takes so long, because we're inundated with thousands. Look, there's 2,000 pages of discovery, but 2,000 pages of discovery usually generates 5 times that amount in a supplemental discovery from subpoenas and other things that we're looking into. This is just really the basic ABCs of it, and everything else is generated by the attorneys in our subsequent investigations. And so you can see why this takes so long. We have to make heads or tails of what is relevant, what isn't, what's going to affect our purposes, and we have to keep in mind our goal. We have to prove conspiracy to commit murder. Right now, we don't have anything tied to Nicole.
No.
So far. Let's talk about the surveillance footage, and Dominic is going to have this on the screen so you guys can see as I'm scrolling through this. So the neighbor's surveillance camera, the infamous neighbor, we have to bring him in to testify. We have to establish a couple of things. If he was familiar with the people coming and going from the Watts home, if he'd ever seen a similar woman, as we will see on the surveillance footage, going in and out, could he identify that definitively as Shanann? Does that look like Shanann to him? And I don't know the answer to these questions. He might say yes or no. But we have to bring him in anyway, because he has to lay the foundational evidence that nobody tampered with the surveillance, right? It was, the surveillance was triggered by motion. When there was motion there, it kicked on, and this is what it recorded. I didn't mess with it in any kind of ways. Matter of fact, the same day I turned everything over to the police. Foundation is laid, and now it could come in as evidence. Exactly. And so let's take a look at that evidence, though. All right. So this is another YouTube. I'll link in the comments, or Dominic will link in the comments, this video. It's by Miss Jade. She posted this like 5 years ago when all of this was still fresh. It's like a 9-minute clip. But the very beginning of this surveillance you could see the outline of a woman. The question is, who is she? And as this progresses a little bit further, you can see her. Now, this camera, it's pointed at the garage, all right? So right here, this light is like the garage light. Here, let me turn my monitor so you can see it. This is the garage. This is the driveway, and this is where you would see the truck kind of back into the driveway, and you saw it kind of just disappear, the entrance, and the theory being, well, he did that so nobody would catch him loading the bodies. There's an alternate theory that is out there that we have to somehow make heads or tails of, in that it's possible that they transported the body out of the back with Nicole Kessinger's help, perhaps in another vehicle. And the reason why is because there is some suggestion that there were fibers of sheets, beddings, consistent with the bedding in the Watts bed, that were found on like fence posts and things of that, as if somebody dragged something over that was on a sheet and then it caught on the fence or whatever. Now, I don't have anything corroborating that. I don't even remember if that's in the actual discovery as being an item that was recovered, but there is that alternate theory in there. And why that's important is because it would support why Nicole Kessinger, her vehicle is not seen in any of this. You know, they took great measures to not get her captured on any of that, which I don't know, because she's obviously very clearly on this. I don't even know what time this surveillance footage is. I'd imagine, though, that this was before Christopher Watts had loaded the vehicles into the truck. I know that her cell phone pinged at 6:16 a.m. The sun was up at that point. Obviously, it's very dark.
It's night, yeah.
So I'm assuming that this is somewhere between midnight and 4 a.m. But very clearly, here's a female figure, a silhouette of a female, and she's walking out of the garage. Look at it. And it's slowed down here, but this, let's just pause. This purse looks an awful lot like the purse that she had with her during the questioning at the interrogator's office.
Okay.
This very exact, the same color, the same shape, whatever. This, to me, is very clearly female hair. I know it's very grainy. And then it just kind of, you know, and that's it. That's kind of the extent of it. And then they replay this video a couple of times, but you can see even better right there. Here's the outline of a face. This is very clearly long hair to me. This is clearly the profile of a woman. Purse, legs, that looks like boots. Does that look like boots to you?
Kind of?
Like right here.
Yes.
I can see it. Maybe it's a boot, maybe it isn't. I don't know.
But at the same time, it doesn't make sense from the ankle down.
I'll tell you who it's not. Does that look like Christopher Watts?
No.
Clearly not, right?
No.
Also, he's wearing like a light tan color shirt or something. Does that look like Shanann? And recall, Shanann was on the Ring camera very prominently with a very pregnant looking belly. This lady does not appear to be pregnant. And look at it again in slow motion. Here is her walking out.
Yeah, there's no belly.
Doesn't look like a belly. I mean, she just looks like I mean, it's difficult for me to know. Let me turn this off. It's difficult for me to know what their size profile would be. So one of the things that we would have to do is we have to go to a visit, an investigative visit. The attorneys, you and me, we're on the same team, and we have to make friends with the neighbor and try to get a reference guide for how tall this person is with respect to this camera angle. Like, for example, you're about 5'5", 5'6". I would put you there. Oh, 5'3" then. I was being generous.
Thank you.
Yeah. And just see 5'3" might stop like right there. I think that Kessinger is about 5'6".
Yeah, she looked tall.
Yeah. And 5'6", 5'7" maybe at best. But yeah, and just get a comparison so the jury can understand that, hey, that's really closely. Again, this is not perfect evidence. She's not going to turn around and wave at the camera, get a view of her face. This is all we got.
Yeah.
We got to take this image and somehow convince that there's no way that that person was anybody other than Nicole Kessinger.
Mm-hmm.
And we could even ask the neighbor, so how often, if your camera is always clicking on upon motion, how common was it for people to go in and out of that garage after midnight, for example? And we may or may not get anywhere with that question. It might be possible that, well, it was all the time because Shanann was, I mean, I don't know the answer to that question.
It happens at my house. There's a cat that crosses almost every night around 3 a.m. And it shows up in the camera almost every night.
Yeah. Yeah, but that would be a cat.
Yes.
But clearly not a
No,
person.
of course, but
Yeah.
like comparing it, I don't think it's very common for somebody to be going in and out at that time if it happened like in the morning, early morning hours, unless like they're coming back from work because they have a late shift or something like that.
Now, mind you, we are connecting this to the dot of the cell phone ping.
Yes.
And the explanation is going to be, look, 6:16 ping, why didn't it ping at 12 o'clock or 2 o'clock a.m. if that was her? Because she turned off her phone, dumbass. And I don't remember in the discovery whether or not there was definitive evidence of that or not. I feel like I'm remembering it wrong. But just off the top of my head, I feel like there was evidence that demonstrated while her phone was always on, in this 6-hour window, it was off. And then she screwed up. She turned it on at 6:16, or maybe it kicked on accident, and therefore cell phone ping. And she knows she screwed up, and then, the rest of the day unfolded. But yeah, this is the surveillance. I don't know, Dominic, does that look like Nicole to you?
Definitely looks like a female.
No, it's definitely a female, right? At the very least, it's not Chris. And then she shows, well, what is she trying to show here? Oh, they're just more close-ups. Bam. Oops. There we go. Staircase. There was some insinuation that Nicole could be seen when the officer approaches the staircase. When the first officer gets there, he has it on his dash cam. You could kind of see inside of the house.
Okay.
And somebody thought they saw like a lady on the top of the stairs.
Oh.
But that's never been, I want to say it's been debunked, but there's some people out there that are still believing that. I don't think that that's viable evidence. It's not something that I would bring in. This just what Chris Watts was wearing that day. That's the inside of the house. And I'm not sure what else she's trying to say. But the main point of this video is, who is she? So we have to get this in evidence somehow. The only way we're getting it in is by bringing in the neighbor and comparing and contrasting. She claims here that this is a ponytail. I don't see a ponytail. That just looks like her hair is down.
But at the same time, the light.
Well, this light is really annoying.
Yeah.
But at the same
there's
time,
some sort of reflection in there.
Yeah.
But it could be a ponytail too, because if she has a lot of hair and she has a high ponytail, I can kind of see it. Yeah. I can kind of see it too.
I don't think from this angle that this is a boot.
No, and to me, this is going to be a very legally blonde moment. To me, those shoes, they look like Vans, like those kind of like flat slip-on tennis shoes. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what's Nicole's style, but that's what it looks to me.
Well, Nicole, I mean, I don't know what her style is. I've seen the pictures of her, but to me, that is the profile of something that resembles her.
I want to Google her, like, how does she usually dress? And
here's what we gotta establish. At what time did Shanann get there? I think it was like at 2:30 in the morning or something.
Yes.
So then at what time was this lady there? Because if she's there before 2:30 in the morning,
she's waiting.
Then it's not Shanann. And if she's there after, then it's either Shanann or Nicole or mystery woman. Who is she is the big question. Not the best evidence, but compelling nonetheless. There's another surveillance footage out there that appears to be young children running. I'm not going to get into those just because we don't have the time. But let's continue in our preparation of how we're marshaling this evidence. So let's get in. All right. Right off of the bat, the cell phone searches, the one from 2017, the one from 2018,
Yes.
I don't think is all that particularly important. In other words, when I say not important, it's not going to be the highlight of my case case in chief as a prosecutor. It's interesting that there was a search on there. There was insinuation that that might have been a typo in the discovery, but law enforcement has come out and emphatically said, no, it wasn't a typo. That's what we got off her phone. I don't have a good explanation for why that search exists. It doesn't make any sense from what we know from Anadarko, the employer, from Nicole, from Chris. So the 2017, although interesting, is not remarkable. I wouldn't waste a whole lot of time on
At
that.
that time, remind me again, they were working for the same company but different locations?
They were, I want to say that Chris was working there for a short time and then she came in afterwards. But the story is they didn't begin their relationship until about June of 2018. So 2017, there wouldn't have been a good reason for that unless it was a mistake or, you know, why was she searching this person? Was there an innocent reason? I don't know. I just had an example of a whole client that I had represented back in 2019 last week that I didn't remember that I did that. And if you were to ask me if I knew this person, I would tell you 100% I don't know who this is. I've never met this person in my life. I've never represented them. And yet there was a whole court appearance and I was there. Not only did I meet her, but I represented her, stood next to her in court. And it blew my mind that I had forgotten about that. And so it's plausible that there's an innocent reason for
coincidence, yeah.
Yeah. So her talking about encouragement to salvage the murders, to salvage the marriage, I think is important. We got to make points of that. We have to introduce the Facebook activity, the activity on her phone.
Definitely.
I want to subpoena all of her PC records, all of her work PC records. I want to subpoena all of her cell phone records. I want to show the jury how stalkerish she was of the Watts family as a whole.
How obsessed.
And why it is ludicrous to suggest that she didn't know the depth of Chris's marriage to Shanann. Preposterous.
And the pregnancy.
Why is she lying about that? Now, on the strength, here's the thing. On the strength of these lies, that does not get us to murder.
No.
We're still so far from that. But what it does is all of these little moments that were catching her in a lie, it's putting dents in her credibility. We want to get it to the point where she is so non-credible that when somebody hears her say something, they're already conditioned to look for the lie. All right, so that's what she said. So tell me what the answer was. That's the point of introducing this credibility evidence. It's relevant upon objection from the defense because it goes to credibility, and credibility is always relevant at any level of law. So that's definitely coming in, but we're subpoenaing Facebook records, PC records, whatever electronic records are out there, we want to get that. I'm shaking your mic. I apologize. We have to talk about the Oxycontin thing. Okay, here's why.
Oh, yes.
Here is why her knowledge of family is important. Because there are cell phone records and transcripts of communications between a pharmacist, Christopher Watts, and Nicole Kessinger. And the tenor of those conversations was, how much oxy can I give somebody to induce a miscarriage? How much is safe to take? How much will induce a miscarriage? How much is harmful? Whatever. They had those conversations. And then there was evidence or suggestions that Shanann got really sick on a trip to North Carolina shortly after these conversations took place. We have in Christopher Watts' confession that I'll never tell you where I got the Oxycontin. I'll take that in my grave. He so cavalierly says that, so chivalrously in defense of Nicole Kessinger. The FBI already knew that those conversations had, so they didn't need him to say that. They didn't press him on that. But we know that that was a thing, conspiracy to commit murder. So here we are. Even that does not go to proving conspiracy for murder. It's conspiracy to cause miscarriage. But that's not the charge, because indeed, Shanann did not die from that interaction, but at least puts her in the arena of being capable of planning such nefarious things as murder. What is the motive? And there's all kinds of speculation that I've heard so many of our commenters talking about. She didn't want to be second place. She wanted to give Chris her first son. There's financial gain. The Colorado family laws are different than in California. It is not a community property state. The way that they divide the house is based off of equity, similar to how you would do it in a Marvin case.
Okay.
Lee Marvin, a palimony case, right? Well, you're not married, so I'm not giving you half, but there's equity because you guys are pooling your assets, and so I'll give you half anyway, as if it was community property.
Okay.
So they just do it a little bit different. It's sort of like what you put in is what you get out of it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if it's based on equity, I could see, even though that's the case, it's still going mostly just split the house because it's what's fair, pulling your assets together. Somebody's paying the bills. You guys are both contributing to the community equally. And they were making similar money at one point. At the very end, they were. So, but the financial motivation, and maybe he doesn't understand that, or maybe he's thinking that she's going to get the entire house and he doesn't want her to do that. Furthermore, maybe he doesn't want to pay child support. Second of all, or third of all, maybe Nicole, envisioning a future with Christopher Watts, doesn't want to be burdened with Chris paying child support, because that's money that could be going to the contribution of their new family. So motive obviously for Chris, but motive for Kessinger, it closely aligns with it. I'm still not quite sure that we're there, because it's still kind of, what we know is we're fairly certain that she had a role in the plan to induce a miscarriage. And we're going to subpoena all that evidence and get that in. And hopefully the evidence speaks to what we think it's going to say. It's always possible when we're confronted with everything that our opinions could change.
Oh, yeah.
And that happens all the time. So we will see. But we also have to tie that in. Okay, so the miscarriage didn't work. So now the new motive is, we could just get rid of her, And we don't have any direct evidence of her planning to commit a murder. Like, for example, we have evidence that she was in on the Oxycontin phone calls.
Yes.
We just never have seen that escalate to murder. So it's a hole, and it's a big one. Now we have to talk about the 111-minute conversation. We have to force so many insinuations for the jury. What did you talk about for 111 minutes? Now, we talked about at length about what that conversation could have been. It's just, it is significant because it happened the night before the murders. Kessinger, you have to believe, is not going to jump on the stand to testify on her own behalf. She is going to exercise her Fifth Amendment right to not testify. We're not going to have the advantage. And if we do get that opportunity, then the defense is an idiot. But we have to plan for the prospect of Nicole is not going to be there to be cross-examined. So how are we going into the subject matter of the phone call? We could try to subpoena Chris and have him come down and speak to what it was talking about. But how confident are you in, number one, his credibility, that the jury believing anything that he has to say, and just his speaking style was so laborious and forced and ridiculous that it's difficult that you're going to get anything definitive unless he just full on says, oh yeah, I talked about it with Nicole. Maybe he's so angry at Nicole because she's over here living her life. And maybe she's got a new boyfriend. Maybe she's planning marriage with some other guy. She just changed her name. She's not even Nicole Kessinger anymore. She's some other person. She's in protective custody, literally, because of all of the vitriol that's come her way. So maybe we could somehow convince Chris that, hey, look, you are defending this person and she is completely forgotten about you. You're going to rot in here for the rest of your life. And Nicole is going to live the life that she envisioned living with you with some other guy. And within 5-10 years from now, you're going to wake up and you're going to be 50 years old and she's going to have 3 or 4 children by the hands of another man. And everything, all of the dreams, all of the thoughts that you threw away your entire family for, all of that, just expose your family for this lady while she's giving the benefits of all of that to some other guy. You still want to protect her, buddy? What do you think? What do you think?
Depends on his ego.
Now, if we are, well, I'm just going to suspect that he's not going to like hearing all of that, but
Yeah,
I'm
but-
also not so confident that it's going to do anything.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, what is it gonna change for him if they?
No, he's still in there.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah. So he's going to have to reaffirm
Mhm.
his confession and say that, oh yeah, we plotted it and I carried him out, or she carried him out, or whatever. We at least know from one prison inmate, and take those with a grain of salt, that he's already tried to pin the murders on Nicole.
Okay.
Now, he didn't say that to the interrogators. He said that to his bunkie. But that is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a long shot that he's going to help out your case, but it's an avenue that should be explored. There should be an attempt to make contact with him to gauge what he's going to
Yes,
say.
exactly.
Yeah, at least turn over the leaf to see what's under and take it from there. Her timeline, we have to tie the dots to that. Her conflicting statements about her work timeline at Anadarko, her involvement with Christopher Watts. We talked about how we're going to get there. And that kind of goes back to the searches about them beginning a relationship long after she had initially searched for them, right? All right, so let us talk about the interview on August 16th.
Okay.
So Nicole, she claims that she stopped talking to Chris on the second day of Shanann's disappearance because of his casual attitude towards everything. And this is when she goes into this whole thing about Christopher wanted to know what to do with the wedding ring. He's like, hey, I still got Shanann's wedding ring. What should I do with? And then she's like, oh, maybe you should just pawn it. Now, she said that, and it sounds very insensitive, and she knew that it sounded insensitive. And so she tried to say, I was so flabbergasted that he would say something like that, that I just very sarcastically said, just pawn it. But I didn't mean that, but, you know, I said it. She said, pawn the ring. But they had multiple phone calls, multiple communications that day, including at the time when the investigators and the detectives were questioning Chris on the phone, like at 2 a.m., the night following the murders, or the morning following everything, where she suspected of listening. So we have to bring in the detective. We have to get him to talk about how, when he was trying to connect with Christopher Watts at that time, they were playing phone tag, and every single time that Chris would answer the phone, there was like this weird silence, and then it just wouldn't connect. It was as if somebody was trying to connect a third party and just wasn't going through, until finally he calls on his work phone. We got to subpoena those phone records to prove that, number one, and lay the foundation.
Phone records.
Right. But we also have to subpoena Nicole's phone records and show how they overlap and intersect. And then this detective's impressions about what was actually going on. Was it odd? Is that normal? That, you know, that kind of thing. And then all of a sudden he calls you on the cell phone. We got to get all that in. It's evidence, because that goes to, what do the cops know? Why was she so concerned about what the detectives were saying? Why would she have an interest in it? The takeaway from a juror, I'd imagine, would be this. You're not so concerned. I mean, you're concerned about what the cops are saying to whoever your family member is, but at the same time, you're having separate and independent conversations with the police, and you're kind of just getting that information from them. The act of listening in on a phone call between detective and suspect is suspicious.
It is very.
But that's all it is suspicious. And again, it's so frustrating. And I think that's the problem with this case. All of these things are suspicious as hell. But do they get us to the point of what we got to prove? Not yet. Not yet. And so our task is monumental. A lot of times when we're prepping for trial, I got to tell you, man, like I told you I was going to lose that motion yesterday. I was like, it's not going to get granted. And then, they granted it, you know? Like I always think that I'm going to lose my case. I'm just always of that mindset. And so in the process of going through, there's going to be moments of victories. Oh, we got her now. It's like, it's just not going to be enough. There's never going to be an occasion, no matter how much evidence I see or that I've prepared, that I feel that we're going to get a conviction in this case. And so it's just going to be one of those things. We got to just keep on digging. We got to bring in her internet search results about her shopping for wedding dresses online, because that speaks to motive. She's envisioning this life with Chris, and it might not even be that important. There's probably perfect. You told me that, I look for wedding dresses.
Even before I was single and I was looking just because I like them. Like, they're pretty. It's fashion.
Yeah. But we got to place everything in the correct context. So we're going to obviously draw up a timeline, and all of these things are going to fit to tell a narrative. We have to talk about how Shanann left on a business trip to Arizona. We got to talk about how on August 11th, Chris hires a babysitter to go out with Kessinger. I think they went to a baseball game at that point. And I think it was around that time when they went to the Lazy Dog, that famous, he pays for it on the joint statement. On August 13th, 2018, we're going to talk about how Shanann returns from her business trip. Around 2 a.m., Nicole Atkinson gave Shanann a ride to their house, the 2800 block of Saratoga Trail, after her business trip. And then on August 13th, in the wee morning hours, that's when, Chris wakes Shanann, and he tells his story about how that's when they had this confrontation. Now, I don't know how true it is. We really have to buckle down the autopsy results and bring in the author of those reports to talk about missing evidence. Like, for example, we might talk about something about, hey, so Chris said that he had sex with Shanann the morning of. Is there evidence of that? If the autopsy reporter says yes, then at least there's some credibility to some of the events that Chris said. And if he says no, well, then the whole thing's out, and then everything's up for debate. And then you could mold that how you want the jury to see it at that point. So Chris is a liar. He was trying to defend Nicole the whole time. She was helping him with the murders. He was trying to take the blame. He's trying to be the fall guy, whatever. Or, there's some things that you could reliably say are true from Chris. The question is, which is true, which is false? I don't know. But that needs to be explored, at least in our investigation, because it was the whole thing, you're never going to see the kids again. And then I lost it. I was straddling her, and he strangles her. And then he talks about how he wrapped her in a blanket, carries her to his truck. Now, I've heard multiple times in the comments that the act of carrying dead body weight is so difficult that there's no chance he would have been able to do it. My pushback on that is it's not as difficult as what people think.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, I don't know.
I'll give you an example.
How big was, my God, Shanann? I can't say her name.
Shanann looked like she was about 5'5", maybe $140 with her pregnant belly.
Okay.
But here's perhaps this is me naively speaking, but I feel like I could teach you 5'3", Ileana, to fireman's carry my dead weight. I weigh about 200 pounds, but I think I could teach you to do it. It might not be the easiest, but I think you can do it. Chris looked like he weighed maybe 185, 190 maybe.
Skinny guy.
Yeah, and he was working out. He was relatively in shape. I don't think that he had that big of an issue picking up 140 pounds, even if it was dead weight, and carrying it to his truck. If he was doing the fireman's carry. Now, maybe he didn't. Maybe he's trying to drag. I don't know.
All I'm gonna say is that when my husband had knee surgery, he was pretty much bedridden for like 1 or 2 days.
Yeah.
And I did find a way to kind of move him with the help of a bunch of things like a cart, but I did it like to move him from the bed to a chair. So
yeah. And
I am small. I'm like 115 pounds. He's like 250. So it's like there's a way. If you want to do it, there's a way to do it. So I don't think it's impossible for him to. I mean, it might not have been easy, but I think it's possible.
Well, I mean, I think if you're wrapping her in a blanket, you kind of use that and you wrap her up and then you hold it like this. And carrying 140 pounds is not that difficult if you're a guy. Yeah. Luggage, I mean, we do it all the time. And it's not that far of a distance from downstairs to upstairs. Dominic could do it. He's over here shaking his head. I see him on peripherals.
It's what they do with the dogs at the vet. They use the
little harnesses, right? Those little they wrap them up like a wiener dog and then they like carry them like that. Is that what you're talking about?
No, like whenever you have to pick up a dog that is on the floor
Yeah.
and you have to carry them, you can just use like a blanket and kind of like push it right under them. Like if you do it fast, and then you kind of carry them kind of like a hammock, and it's a lot
Hammock.
easier. Yeah.
Yeah. I just don't buy that he needed Nicole there to help him. That's
No.
not helping our case. I think the defense could easily demonstrate.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I was defense attorney, I'd probably ask you to pick up dead 140 pounds like a mannequin or something in a blanket and just see if you could lift it off the ground. And then it might have, maybe I'd try to do it and see, oh, look, I could definitely do it. It's not that hard. But it's not helping our case. I think that's more a point for the defense to make.
Yes.
That he didn't need Nicole there to help. Maybe with the cleanup. Now, the cleanup is a different thing. We bring in the evidence. What kind of chemicals were there? Now, I don't know how reliable that evidence is going to be. I don't know if it exists about if they did like a forensic about what kind of cleaning agents were used and if it was abnormal. Like, for example, sometimes in these murder cases, you'll see bleach is, why is there bleach on the ceiling? That doesn't make any, what were you cleaning up there? You know? And so I don't know if that evidence exists, but we have to look into that to try to build our case.
That kind of reminds me, completely off topic, that I saw recently on Facebook, like this group that they do renovations, and there was a bathroom that had tile on the ceiling.
Tile on the ceiling?
Yes.
For what?
And people were joking like, so how do you clean it? Do you mop the ceiling? So that will be a situation where Clorox on the roof, it wouldn't be, and the ceiling, it wouldn't be that strange.
Yeah, maybe. But even then, it would be like spot evidence. Like, okay, well, you got towels up there. Fine, you're cleaning the ceiling. Okay, but what about like all the walls? Why are you Clorox and everything? You know, so the depth of it. They didn't find any blood evidence. They didn't find any of that. So I don't know what they were cleaning up. And the fact that there was no blood evidence,
it kind of goes with his.
It's significant because they wouldn't have had the need to clean up that extensively. Maybe Shanann was very clean, which by all accounts, that she was one of the types that she's on top of it like that. She's not going to let things go without a good cleansing every now and then. So that may or may not even, we may or may not even be scoring points with that, depending on how that evidence comes out. But it's something to investigate. We got to talk about Nicole Kessinger being her discomfort at the Watts house. She brought up to the investigators how she was uncomfortable being there. My opinion is, I think that she was there, that she saw the pictures of him and his family. She got extremely jealous. She says that she was uncomfortable there, but at that point, and I want to say that that would have been after the Oxy incident, that we have now escalated from wanting to induce a miscarriage to avoid the child support to let's just get rid of her. Or now, maybe that's when the switch flips, where she's more open to this idea of, well, disposing of somebody's body. Now, that is a leap for a normal person to make. Then, oh, I was uncomfortable and I don't want to be the woman number two, and I want to give him his first son. And so, oh, we definitely have to murder her. That is a leap for any reasonable person to make.
Yes.
We have to bring in evidence of the sex cults and black magic that she was obviously involved with.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I don't know a whole lot, but I'll tell you what is out there before I forget. I didn't talk about this much on the last episode.
You mentioned it, but didn't go on.
Yeah, but it was a sex magic thing. It was a membership based on an initiation system. And that initiation system, I'm very interested in. I would want to talk to this guy. What did he know? The Ordo Templis Orientis is the name of it. It is an occult secret society and hermetic magical organization founded at the beginning of the 20th century. The origins of OTO can be traced back to the German-speaking occultist Karl Kellner, Theodor Ries, Heinrich Klein, and Franz Hartmann. In his first incarnation, OTO was intended to be modeled after and associated with European Freemasonry. Her dad is allegedly a Freemason. So we have a really sharp audience. Whenever we make mistakes, they're going to call us out on it. And I can't tell you how many people called me out on, he's not in law enforcement. He was an engineer. You're right. I fully see. The problem with this case is it's been open for 6 years and there's been so much misinformation spread out there. I have heard that he was a part of law enforcement for a long time and I just kind of went with it. But I corroborated. He was not in part of law enforcement. He was an engineer. He was a guy. He had influence. And part of that influence, people speculate, I have not corroborated, that he was a Freemason. This OTO, Ordo Templis Orientis, is an offshoot of European Freemasonry.
Okay.
So there might be something there. And that was the source of his influence over the investigation or whatever. The founder and first head of the order, Karl Kellner, wanted to create an Academia Masonica wherein various rights of high degree Freemasonry could be conferred with German-speaking countries. And it just goes on to talk about the death. It talks about the origins, and I'm literally looking at the Wikipedia for this group, but there's a lot of information. I mean, it talks about the history of and they go all the way back to like the 1910s, 1800s, late 1800s, after Crowley's death. It talks about their philosophy. It was described by Crowley as the first of the great old Ion orders to accept the Book of the Law. OTO originally borrowed ritual material from irregular Masonic organizations, and although some related symbolism and language remains in use, the context has changed to Thelema and its tenets. The order offers esoteric instruction through dramatic ritual, guidance in a system of illuminated ethics, and fellowship among aspirants to the great work of realizing the divine in the human. You want to know what this sounds like? You ever saw that movie Eyes Wide Shut?
No.
Dominic, you ever seen it? Have you ever seen that movie?
No.
Sorry.
I want to say, that's okay. It came out like in 1998 or 97 or 99. It was the last film made by the great Stanley Kubrick. Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman at the time. They were married, but it is basically a movie about a group that very strangely resembles this.
Okay.
They have these weird sex rituals that seem to involve human sacrifice. And if you watch the movie, you got to watch it a couple times. And the first one, you're going to like, what the F did I just watch? What was that about? I've watched it 3 or 4 times. It is a wild movie. And I don't want to spoil it. Just go watch it yourself. I'm just going to say that what this group is somewhat resembles that movie. And they have this whole secret society. Freemasonry is basically all these rich folks, very powerful, influential people. They have this secret society so they could do their freak stuff, whatever. And it's like sex orgies and human sacrifices. And literally in that movie, Eyes Wide Shut, somebody is murdered. And they take their secrecy very seriously. You got to have a password and you got to have the whole thing. There was like a master person that was overseeing all of it. Watch that movie, and I feel like you'll start to get a feel for what this group may have been. Eyes Wide Shut. Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman, the whole thing.
I think I was a kid at that time. So
you would not have been allowed to watch that movie.
Exactly. That's why I have never heard of it before.
Yeah, and so... But look at what this guy Crowley is saying. He wrote in his confessions, OTO is in possession of one supreme secret. The whole of its system is directed towards communicating to its members by progressively plain hints this all-important instruction. The main objects of the instruction are 2. It is firstly necessary to explain the universe and the relations of human life therewith. Secondly, to instruct every man and woman how best to adapt his or her life to the cosmos and to develop his faculties to the utmost advantage. I accordingly constructed a series of rituals: Minerval, man, magician, master magician, perfect magician, and perfect initiate, which should illustrate the course of human life in its largest philosophical aspect. And if you're going to illustrate the course of human life, you have to necessarily implicate human death. And in a group like this that is keen on these ritualistic initiation rites of its members, perhaps some of those rituals or initiation rituals involve sacrifice of individuals. Am I talking out of my ass right now? Yeah, this is 100% pure speculation. But if I am putting together this trial and I'm at the very early planning stages, I have to consider everything. And if there is a tie-in to death with this group, human sacrifice, Eyes Wide Shut, Nicole Kessinger, Christopher Watts, Shanann, if there's a connection there in a case where all I have is circumstantial evidence, I got to consider every avenue. And I would subpoena this 73-year-old shaman that she was assuming that is still alive. He'd be like 78 now. And just get some insight into what they were all about and what they were talking about the day that Shanann Watts went missing. Because, recall that she made these phone calls to her spiritual advisor. It was about sex magic, and we talked about that. And then she met up with this guy named Jim at her apartment. We got to bring in Jim. We got to send somebody out to talk to whatever Jim was. Who was Jim?
I don't remember Jim.
He's mentioned in the discovery. I don't know a whole lot about him or what the deal is with that. I don't know why she went there, but she did go after work to this guy Jim's apartment. We got to know all about that. We have to talk about, and this is for the subpoenaed phone records, at 5:01, Nicole calls Chris twice, deletes the calls. So here's where we're getting to the crux. Like, the strength of our case is this bizarre phone activity. And you have to also understand that Nicole is not going to be there to cross-examine to get any of this out. She doesn't have to incriminate herself. We're not going to have that. And I doubt that if we call Chris on the stand, he's going to have anything to say. So how are we getting this evidence in? How are we going to do it? All we can do, and really, this is all we really have. We're not going to be able to get into the content of the phone calls. So we have to be so keenly aware of the context that we are creating for the jury. They have to be left with no other conclusion than, well, they were calling to discuss stuff related to the investigation. And we know that. Why? Because immediately after calling Chris twice, she deleted the calls. And we'll have that on the phone records. So again, very circumstantial. Still so many holes. And nobody's helping us on this case, right? So at 5:30, Chris calls her. She deleted it again. Why? This is more material for closing arguments. This is our big rousing moment. We have to really make sure that this piece of information hits home. We have to talk about how 11:09, the night of the murders, there was a 51-minute phone call between her and Chris that she deleted immediately after. We got to talk about how an hour later, Chris called her back for 31 minutes. We got to talk about how at 1:12 a.m., Nicole called Chris. They spoke for 3 minutes. We got to talk about how at 1:51 a.m., Chris calls Nicole. They talk for about 8 minutes. And then at 1:58 a.m., the detective that we're subpoenaing, he's gonna come in and talk about this, that Chris and the detective start playing phone tag. Every time he would call, his personal phone would have dead air on his line. And we have to ask the defendant why the detective, why did he think that was? This would repeat. I think it was like a total of 8 calls. And then ultimately, Chris calls Nicole while he's playing phone tag with the detective. We really got to hammer home this timeline. They talk for about a minute, and then 1 minute later, and we have to bring the phone records together so we can parallel them. Chris calls the detective back from his work phone, not his personal phone. And then at the exact same time, he's having the conversation with the detective. Nicole calls Chris's personal phone. He puts the phone on speaker, presumably. And then she's listening in to whatever he's speaking with for the detective. That phone call from Nicole to Chris's personal phone lasts for about 11 minutes. And that's the last call between the two of them. That was it. That was it. And then she tried to destroy her SIM card. And then it's like, somebody's like, there was one comment where it was like, hey, I work for the phone company. I'm just confused about why she would destroy the SIM card, because most of the stuff that's on the SIM card would have been just pulled from the phone anyway. And like, it doesn't matter what was on the SIM card. What matters is she tried to destroy it, because
she was thinking, she probably didn't know that
it wasn't really a thing, right? And so we didn't need the information on there. We just needed the jury. We need the jury to know that she tried to destroy it. Why? The secretiveness of these phone calls. So at this point, she has to be aware that there is an active investigation going on. We have to consider the possibility of further charges against Nicole. Obstruction of justice,
Yes.
tampering with
Tampering
evidence,
I was going to mention that earlier. Yeah, if at least.
destruction of electronically stored information, which is a big thing. Curious. You got her dead to rights on those issues. Bring up those charges. I don't know if they would be misdemeanor if you could promote them as a felony, but those are additional charges that should have been brought against Nicole. And so if I'm the DA, I'm charging her with that. They're going to be underlying charges between the main charge of conspiracy to commit murder. So she knew, no chance she didn't know that there was an active investigation. She admitted to the cops she knew this. She admitted to the cops that she knew that Shanann and the kids were missing. She's having these phone calls between Chris and herself, and she's destroying SIM cards and deleting phone calls, knowing there's an active investigation. That is criminal. She'd be charged. She should have been charged, but she wasn't. At the very least, we should be able to get convictions on that. If nothing else, we should be able to get her on that, if not the conspiracy aspect of this. So we have to bring in the phone stuff about the Oxycontin. We talked about that. You know, we're going to point out the inconsistencies, the inconsistent statements, memory lapses. We have to talk about Nicole's frustration or Chris's frustration and the way that Nicole phrased it to the interrogators. Why was she so intimately aware about their financial struggles?
Oh, yes.
Because it plays into the motive that, hey, she knew that they had already filed for bankruptcy once. She's talking about the financial struggles that Chris told her about because Shanann was like overspending and, you know, he'd make money and it would constantly be gone. And, you know, she knew about that. It plays into the motive. It's just more stuff to bring in because that part of it ties in. And so far, that is really the only evidence that we have that's tangible, that is a real thing. So what do we have? Inconsistent statements, her active destruction of evidence. We have her planning and conspiring what we're going to say to induce a miscarriage, and she may or may not agree with that, or it's still going to be speculative. We have, if we can get information from the sex cult that there was like a human sac, and we're not going to get that, by the way. Those organizations have been around for hundreds of years for a reason. There's a level of protection with groups like that. They're not going to talk, and we can't make them.
No.
And whatever they do behind closed doors, we're never going to know unless we infiltrate it somehow. And I don't think that either one of us are volunteering to join the sex cult ourselves in the name of PI work.
We got assuming that we get the phone records that kind of match.
That's the strength of it. But I feel like it's just not enough. I don't have enough. I need more. I need more. If I'm going to implicate Nicole for murder, I need more. There's just not enough here. We're never getting a conviction on this. I'm probably making a lot of our listeners mad, angry, but it's the truth.
It is.
I'm looking at a case like this, and granted, I never think that I'm going to win any of my cases. I always go into it that I don't have enough. I need more. It's very possible that, hey, I get the right jury and we make the right points, or something breaks our way during trial with motions or something a witness says. There's just so many different ways to poke holes in this. If you're the defense, they got the easy. They don't even have to present a case in chief. They're not going to bring Nicole on the stand. She's not going to talk about anything. This is really going to be, if this went to trial, an act of the district attorney, DA Rourke, fumbling around for 3 to 6 weeks trying to prove a case that is not provable based on the known information out there. I haven't considered, I know that a lot of you are going to start hitting me up about conspiracy theories of this and that. I'm not looking at those because I don't have the evidence to prove those things. But just assume that whatever, because I've already been going for an hour and a half. I got to wrap this up. If there is evidence to, or any truth to those conspiracies, just know that in the course of the next 3 months, I would go to the ends of the earth to tie those together, because you can see the holes in this case with what is in the discovery. I just don't have it. I don't have it. I can't even prove that she conspired to murder, much less prove that she was involved in the murders. As some people want to say, oh, maybe it was like a 2 against 1. She was holding him down while Chris did whatever, or maybe she was drugged. I got to get the toxicology to confirm that. Maybe there's some truth to that. I don't remember off the top of my head if I saw that or not, but let's just assume, okay, so she was drugged. All right. How does that tie into Nicole's involvement to this? So from my attorney perspective, and I'm assuming from yours as well, I'm starting to understand when I try to prep this for a trial, why she was never charged. And I'm going to just assume that the reason why they didn't bring her up on the lesser charges, destruction of evidence and those kinds of things, was because then the logical conclusion would, well, then charge her for murder. And it would have been like this huge embarrassment. And you got to consider from the DA's perspective, we're dragging the family through this. They're going to have to go through all of it. They're presumably going to be there. And the families themselves are saying, you know what, just leave it alone. We believe that Chris did it. We don't think that Nicole's involved. They came out and said that. And so you have all of that. Nobody's wanting you to go forward with the investigation. Maybe Freemason dad is wanting to shut down the interrogations. And so they just, screw it. I guess we're good. And so if anything, here's what I feel. And I haven't listened to DA Rourke's reasoning. I just know that he's called everybody else idiots that thinks that Nicole Kessinger should be charged. From my objective opinion, this is not a case that I'm prepared to bring yet. However, I'm not closing this investigation right now, seeing her on surveillance like that. That image, whether or not you believe it was Nicole Kessinger or not, is just a coincidence too far for me to ignore. And on that basis, I might not bring charges yet, but I'm preparing to bring charges. Yes, I'm not giving up on the investigation is my point. So for all of you that were wondering why Nicole's not been charged, even though I'm looking at all of these things that make her a very suspicious target, there's still too many holes. And you have to know you're not getting any help. Nicole's not going to jump on the stand. If Nicole were to jump on the stand and I had the chance to cross-examine her, that would be a 1.5 to 3-day cross-exam. And I'm bringing up every stupid little thing she ever said in that interrogation and every inconsistency, anything that I have to poke holes at her credibility and show that she is a bold-faced liar. You better believe it's going to be like when Murdoch was cross-examined by that one attorney and how that lasted forever. And he just hit him with, I think the direct exam was like an hour, and then cross-exam, it was like a day or two long. It was like this huge moment. It's never going to happen. There's no competent defense attorney that's putting her on a stand, and I can't make her testify. But if she did, you know what? I'm doing it just for the spectacle, because I'm banking on the fact that her dad is not going to be able to stop what's happening. He's going to sit his ass back, or he's going to get removed from the courtroom via taser. And so it's just me and her and the judge and defense attorney's objections. And I'm going all in. In that dreamlike scenario that would never happen. If I knew that I could, I would bring this all day. It's just not happening. There's not enough. So, to conclude, 100%, I believe that Kessinger is at the very least guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, but I can't prove it. And none of the credible evidence that could be corroborated that exists proves it either. There might be speculative conspiracy. There's a lot of stuff floating out there. I can't speak to those things, and I won't. And that's the reason why she's living peacefully in witness protection right now with whatever her new name is. Any closing thoughts, Ileana? Do you want to give a closing argument?
No. No, I mean, all I can say is I agree with you. Like going through the evidence, what we have, and everything, and it makes a lot of sense why they didn't bring the charges. So
Yeah. And you know what's disappointing is I thought that we were going to do this exercise. I was all excited when I called you yesterday. Like, hey, we're going to do this, and I was really thinking that, you know what, I'm going to make the big case. We're going to bring it, but I'm getting to the end of this, and it's like there's not enough. I need more. And so we will conclude on that. We've thought about doing a mock trial, but the act of doing a real mock trial is just so, number one, it's expensive to do that.
Yes.
Who's going to play the witnesses for two? There's just not a realistic way to do that. But if I had the opportunity from somebody willing to collaborate and like maybe play some of these roles, I don't know. I don't know the logistics of how that would even work, but it would be fascinating to watch. And then you guys could see in real time how those would play out. And we could give at least the public some idea of how this is going to go at trial. But from now, the best we're going to get is my sampling opening statements, trying to play both sides. And that's all we really have to say on the matter of Christopher Watts. Are we going to revisit this episode or this subject matter? I don't think we are. I think we're going to move on from Christopher Watts. I think people are anxious to see, well, some of you are. 85% of you wanted us to do this show. So I don't know. Well, you never know what happens. We'll see where we go next week. I'll throw up another poll, see what people want to cover next. But by all means, offer your suggestions. A lot of you have offered suggestions. I'm going to look into those and see what is most likely to get the attention of the general public. Man, that was I'm more tired now than it was after the last show, and we went for like 3.5 hours. But I just want to take the time to thank all of you that are listening. So listen, we've been doing the show for a long time, and it's only recently just started to really grow. I swear, like, we started this podcast in 22, and then it was just like a legal advice channel, and we're doing on like Zoom cameras and stuff, and we're just kind of fiddling around with it, not expecting it to go anywhere. Then one of our videos hit. It's like, holy shit, we got 1,000 subscribers all of a sudden. And then it kind of stayed there for, we climbed to like 1,700, and it was like that until about January this year. We're approaching 6,000. We just hit 5,000. We're rapidly approaching 6. Nice. And so I so much appreciate all of you that have subscribed and are part of our show. We have our detractors. And hey, if this show is not for you, you don't like my style, I got to just say this. I've seen traditional lawyer podcasts out there, and everybody has their own style. Most people expect attorneys to be these buttoned up, stick up their ass, specific type of personality. That's not my intent with this show. My intent with this show has always been I wanted it to be like a conversation between us. After dinner at some fancy steakhouse somewhere, I'm having my whiskey, and we're just bullshitting about life and true crime cases, and that's kind of what we do. My approach is never going to be the button-up lawyer type. That's never been my approach. It's really anything, and it works for me in court. Ileana, are you familiar with Jerry Spence? He's this trial attorney, very famous, one of the most famous trial attorneys of the 20th century. He's still alive, and he runs this trial advocacy group camp down, I want to say in Texas.
I don't know why the name sounds familiar.
I feel like I've brought him up before.
No, you have brought it up before, but at the same time, like separately. Name sounds familiar, but that's about it.
Yeah. Well, his philosophy on what an attorney should be so 100% matches mine. And he illustrates the point, and I forget the name of the book, but he gives this illustration about how he was trying this big case, and these attorneys were walking in with their fancy $5,000 suits and their shiny shoes and their belt buckles and their hair properly coiffed. Is that the term? Coiffed. And they're making the big display about it. The big movie attorneys, whatever the movie suit or the show Suits comes to mind.
Yeah.
An image of a douchebag attorney, and they got their whole setup, and it's the lead attorney, and they got 4 other attorneys down the road because they've been hired by this multi-million-dollar corporation to try the big civil lawsuit against them, this multi-million-dollar case. And on the side of plaintiff is this raggedy-looking plaintiff's attorney. He's exhausted. His body is worn down. He's frumpy looking. His hair is disheveled and greasy. His suit is wrinkled and boxy. He looks like he perspires a lot. And it's just him. He doesn't have a team of paralegals or other associates to help him out. And he's taking on these douchebag attorneys on the other side. And he is so passionately ingrained with his client's story that when the juror, and this is what Jerry Spence says, the art of trial advocacy, the juror has to pick who to trust. And in a trial setting, credibility and trust is everything. And in this scenario, he opined that you got these douchebag attorneys and they're, fantasies, whatever, and this other guy, he's so impassioned and he speaks with a genuineness and passion for his clients in the case. Immediately, the juror trusts him. And in that moment, he has the upper hand, despite the appearance, despite his lack of buttoned-up posture and professionalism in the manner he speaks and all of these things. And he wins over the hearts and minds of jury. And he wholeheartedly demolishes the douchebag attorneys, right? And I say that because it's very much my style to just kind of just shoot from the hip. The greatest trial attorney that we've ever had in the United States of America, what was his name? Dominic, flash the name on the screen. It's like Charles, man, he did the monkey trials, the evolution, not Charles Darwin. Who am I thinking of, Ileana?
I have no idea.
The greatest trial attorney in our country's history was very much that way. He would give these rousing closing arguments and plea to the jurors' passions and humanity. And he would come in these raggedy looking suits and his hair was greasy. And as he would go and we'd get excited, it would like hang down in front of his face. And he was just so always looked like his weather beaten and worn. And he won all the time. It's the art of trial advocacy to me, to humanize yourself. And one of the first things that Jerry Spence teaches you as a lawyer, because I feel like attorneys so often forget, is how to be human. So he'll, like the first day of a trial advocacy camp, he'll say, okay, we're going to get up at 6 a.m. and you're going to take a walk by yourself, a hike for like an hour, and you're going to read a poem or you're going to write a poem. And then we're going to come back at noon and you are going to sing a cappella, a song. Just sing it from the heart. I can't sing. I don't care. I just want to hear you sing. In that humanity of the song, in the words of the chorus, I want you to start to translate that and amalgamate that with your soul, because that is how you are to represent your clients, as if you were singing the most passionate of songs. Luther Vandross, Marvin Gaye, whoever, Patsy Cline, whoever your favorite singer is. There's endorphins that are released. And I brought up the mariachi thing.
Yeah.
There's endorphins that are released when you sing a song like that and you put yourself in that position. Your brain accesses regions of the soul that you didn't think were possible. And in that transformation, you transform into a douchebag attorney, into a trial advocate for your client. Before I go too long on the rant, that's not what the show's about today. I'm so glad it's at the tail end. That is what being a trial attorney is all about. And I will leave you all with those thoughts. Now, that wraps up the Christopher Watts part of the episode. Now, strictly for our subscribers, and if you're welcome to stick along, we are going to bring in the purple haze lights and give our legal advice on various family law scenarios. This has nothing to do with Christopher Watts. Just know that. I'm going to this is strictly for our subscribers. If it's your time to check out, then check out. But I screwed that up, didn't I? It is time. Hey, Dominic, how do I do this? I'm asking you like you know. Here it is. Here it is. It's
There you
time to
go.
bring in Purple Haze. All right. So, family law after dark. You know, I've had this whiskey sitting here for the entire show, an hour 47 minutes now,
Oh,
and I don't think I've taken a sip. But now it is appropriate. So, let us get in to some of these inquiries. Here we go. Let's begin. I'm going to go in reverse order here. All right, we're going to do 3. Legal divorce advice needed, please. Oh, this will be a good one for you, Ileana.
okay.
It says, hello, I am stuck in an extremely abusive marriage with a husband of 2 years. I live separately from him. He is living in the house that we bought together, and which is my down payment too. We have no children, thank God, and I am unable to get out of this marriage because he is not agreeing for a divorce, and I cannot take his abuse longer, and hence I cannot go back to him. Let me just begin with this caveat. I don't know if she's living in a
Yes.
no-fault state or not.
Exactly.
Nobody gives a shit whose fault it is. In California, nobody cares. And if it's at fault state,
Mhm.
I'm 99% positive that domestic violence would be a reason that a judge would grant a divorce.
Mhm.
So let's get over the notion that you need anybody's permission
In other words, like in California, you don't need the permission or the other person to agree,
or a good reason.
Yeah.
You don't even need a reason.
which is something that I don't know. A lot of people think that they need the other party to agree to.
Oh, it's because in the movies it's like, oh, I got you now. I got you on candid camera, cheating on me with the I don't know, the postman or somebody. You didn't need all of that dipshit. You just needed to file your petition. That's in California. That
In
is
California,
unique
yes.
to us in California. She says, I want my stuff back, which is in that house, like furniture, down payments, which was all purchased by me as part of the dowry cultural system that I belong to, where the tradition is the girl had to spend for everything. So that would be akin to her inheritance, separate property, I'm assuming.
Yes.
This dowry system issue is a different story, as I didn't have a say when I asked my parents not to spend for my furniture. So basically, me and my parents paid for everything that he is having in that house. Now, I want to get out of this situation very badly, and I want to get a divorce. I'm not in a financial condition where I can go legally because I do not have financial capacity to pay for attorneys. I live in the East Coast in the U.S. How do I get my stuff back? How do I handle this? Help me, please. It wasn't clear to me. Did she say that she purchased these things during marriage? This dowry system.
I'm thinking usually Indian culture, the female family gives like the money to purchase pretty much everything, or they give like the stuff to the marriage. That's what I'm thinking.
Here's the breakdown.
Mhm.
Taking this from a community property perspective, because I believe most of the states on the East Coast are community property states.
I think so, yes.
I forget which ones are not. I don't know. But let's just assume it is community property. If it's not community property, then they base everything on separation based on equity. So what you put in is what you get out. In the most paraphrasing of legal principles. But in a community property state, here's the rules. If you purchase this stuff with your money prior to your 2-year marriage, that's your separate property anyway. You don't have to have a court order. I mean, they could order it, but that's your separate property. You could just get an order to retrieve your stuff. You got to file for the divorce. You have to set the grounds for the divorce, the grounds being domestic violence in this case. I don't know if she has proof or to the extent in which she would have to prove domestic violence, but judging from most domestic violence statutes, domestic violence is a very broad spectrum. It's not limited to physical abuse. You go on a number of different things. And for example, in California, it's anything that disturbs the peace of an individual, literally meaning that you could wear an article of clothing that so offends the conscience to be an act of domestic violence. And what scenario is that possibly? Well, your wife wants to go out and she's dressed like she's going to the strip club or whatever with all of her friends because she knows it's going to piss you off. Can be considered, and I've seen it alleged as an act of domestic violence. Never mind that. To the extent, I'm just going to assume that let's just assume that you could prove domestic violence. You're going to be granted a divorce based off of that. Once you're in, assuming it's a community property state, you're going to state what items are in that house that belong to you as your separate property.
Meaning what you brought before.
What you brought into the marriage, you get to keep. But more importantly, even if they bought it during the marriage because of this dowry system, if she purchased it with her own money, maybe we can just prove that it's her separate property anyway because it came from separate property sources. I don't know how a dowry works in her scenario.
I don't know. I think it's actually the parents, so it will be a gift.
If it was from the parents, then it would be akin to an inheritance. But it could also be interpreted as a gift to the community.
Yes, a gift to the community is what I think it would be more akin to, because the parents, inheritance, they will need to die. The parents are probably still alive.
That's true. Assuming that that's the source of the income, maybe it was the grandparents.
Yes.
We don't know. And again, depending on how that dowry works, I need a lot more facts, is what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
So here's the deal with the down payment. If you paid for that house with the down payment, if you paid from your own separate stash of money that was not community money, meaning it didn't come from a bank account that you guys owned jointly, or it wasn't from money that you earned during the 2-year marriage, then you're entitled to 100% in most states of a reimbursement for that down payment. And that's not the case in every state. And I don't know what state she is. She didn't really say.
She's in the East Coast, she said. So.
There's a lot of East Coast states.
Yeah.
But for example, in California, if you used money you'd been saving prior to marriage to spend $100,000 on a down payment, well, upon divorce, you get all that money back, 100%.
Or say that you have a house prior to marriage and you get married and then you sell that house and go ahead and use that money for a down payment, then whatever amount of money for the down payment, that's your separate property.
It just has to be a source of money that that was basically your separate income or asset or something, right? That's it. That's how we characterize it. If you can't do that, then you're not entitled, and you're not entitled to recover it. Then basically you request or a forced sale of all of that furniture, and you guys split the proceeds. That's how it works. Those are really the only two outcomes. And honestly, I need a lot more. But the tenor of her question was, how do I get my stuff back? Well, you request it back in your divorce petition and characterize it as your separate property and be prepared to prove it. And we've gone over some of the ways that you can do that. How to get out of the marriage in a at-fault state, you're going to have to prove the domestic violence. So that's really all I got to say for this person. Without more additional facts, this is about as best I can do. Let's move on to another one. This person, it's a short but sweet one, which is a good thing.
Okay.
So I'm looking for some advice on how to go about divorcing my spouse. We have no kids, no joint accounts, no shared assets, and we don't own any property together. And it seems like it would be an easy divorce. Does anyone have any recommendations on affordable divorce lawyers, since I'm 100% sure this will be a simple, uncontested divorce? Also, should I go ahead and start the separation, and do I need to prepare an agreement for that? I'm nervous and just not sure where to start. We are ending a 10+ year marriage, and this is, of course, my first time. Okay, so her name is Miss Rumi. I'm assuming that she is a female. 10-year marriage. That is a long-term marriage in the state of California, so it may not be as simple as you would hope. Attorneys are expensive. 100% they are. But when you're divorcing people, it's really worth it to get yourself a good attorney to protect your assets, because you have no idea sometimes what you're giving up. And look, what I would say is this: if it's really a simple, uncontested divorce, then don't go hire an attorney. Try to get it done on your own. File the divorce petition by yourself. And you mentioned, should I legally get an agreement for separation? No, if you want a divorce, just divorce them.
Yeah.
I mean, you could apply for a legal separation. You can do that. It's a big waste of time, in my opinion.
It is, yes.
You're going to get, that was almost...
It's like doing double the work.
Yeah.
end up in the same place. Like, it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
I mean, but I've seen some people do it.
I mean, if you're thinking legal separation, just file for divorce. If you want to reverse it, then reverse it. You can do that. But I digress. No kids is a great thing. That makes it easier to separate. No joint accounts doesn't mean anything.
Doesn't mean, yeah. And the same thing with the no shared assets. That's like a misconception whenever I do consultations. Oh, we don't have anything together, but separately, do you have a bank account that you keep money in? Do you have a retirement account?
Yep.
And they're like, oh, yes. Then that's then community property. So it's not as simple as it seems.
Yeah. Like I could see a scenario where she's sitting in my office and she's like, oh yeah, we don't have any joint accounts, but you got a retirement account. Yeah, but it's only in my name. Well, he's entitled to like a good portion of it, depending on how long you've had it for and the date of marriage and date of separation and whatever. We'd have to do a quadro in California to determine that qualified domestic relations order. I hate that term. But yeah, he's entitled to a lot more than you think. You're entitled to a lot more of his stuff than you think. And the problem isn't that you guys want to get a divorce without any, hiccups. It's just that it's really hard to do that when people figure out that they're entitled to way more than they thought. And then it's like, well, I want it to be peaceful, but I want to get everything I'm entitled to. It's like, oh, right. Well, he's not going to agree to that. For example, one of you two, because this is a 10-year plus marriage, if you were in the state of California and somebody requested alimony, the judge doesn't have any legal authority to put an expiration date on the award of alimony unless there's an agreement. What does that mean? It means that somebody's going to get awarded alimony and it's going to run until either one of you dies or remarries. That's alimony for life. Did you know that? Does he know that? Are you entitled to alimony? Is it he? Is it going to be him? Have you had those discussions? Because those are important things because somebody catches wind. So I'd assume that it's going to be something like, oh, we'll terminate rights to spouse. And then it's like, oh, wait a minute. I could get like $1,500 for life. Really? All right. Well, I think it's fair because I put in 10 years in this marriage and I've helped him while he went and got on and got his career. And all of a sudden people start getting bitter.
And then it's not as simple.
The truth is that nobody really needs a divorce attorney if it was that simple. The problem is that people have egos and people have emotions and they have feelings. And when they start figuring out that they're entitled to a lot more than they thought, well, that's when the complications come. So look, there's a lot of attorneys that are out there that will do consultations for free. I do free consultations. Ileana does free consultations. And I won't tell you how to litigate your case because I can't get that done in an hour. But I will tell you that, look, these are the issues. This is what's going to be very difficult to settle. This is what he's going to be. This is what he's going to know and not going to want to give up. And this is what you're entitled to. Did you know all of that? And at the end of it is, okay, well, maybe we'll just write up an agreement, but then you're asking for all this stuff and he's not going to agree to that. And now we're litigating. And now we're going through discovery. And now we're, RFOs for temporary support, RFOs for forced sale of the house, RFOs for forced sale of the vehicles. And then it becomes a mess. Then it gets all over. Well, I want the Silverado back. That was my bed springs. That was my, what do you call those things? The bed foundations. I forget.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
But they get really crazy with it. Once you get started down that rabbit hole, there's virtually no end until you spent tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in attorney fees, and we're 2 years later, and in a trial that has persisted for months, if not years, because we don't have consecutive days to give you in court. And so we're constantly, I got a case like that now. I have a trial that started in July of 22.
Oh, wow.
It is now 24 and the trial is still going.
Oh my goodness. But for the same issues or?
Yes. Because there's lots of evidence and we can't get through it and they can't give us consecutive days in that department, or they haven't historically. And I mean, there's some other stuff like request for continuances because somebody didn't show up to court or somebody miscalendared the date or whatever. That happens. But just an example, it's a literally 1.5 year long trial for something that should have been so simple.
Yeah.
So my recommendations is try to get it done for free. If you guys come up and draft an agreement and it says, we'll keep the debts in our name, we'll keep the assets in our name, we don't own a house, that's good. don't have to worry about child support. Both of us will terminate our rights to alimony, terminate our rights to each other's retirement accounts, and he will agree to it and you'll agree to it. And fine, write it up. You don't need me to do that. Just do it. And if the judge signs it, then you guys are officially divorced and then you got it done for free. But the second somebody catches wind, well, you're going to want to give me a call. But it is in your best interest to, at the very least, find a free consultation so you at least know what you're looking at. Because I bet you didn't know that I was going to talk for however long I've just been talking about this very simple fact pattern. But there's a lot more of it than meets the eye. Like, it's simple to you, but I'm looking at red flags all the way down the line.
And the alternative is that sometimes people don't seek that at least consultation to know what they're entitled to. They end up doing an agreement that they think that is correct. And then, I don't know, a couple of months later, they realize
Rejected.
it's like, no, not only that, they say they accept it. And a couple of months later, they realize, oh, I could have had part of his retirement. And now what do I do?
Well, you already agreed to it, so
Exactly.
it's a moot point. What do you want now?
I had a case once like that. The guy even did. Well, actually, I'm doing one right now, where they did everything by agreement, and now they want to change everything, and it's like, oh,
I had a case like,
a
well,
little bit hard.
I had this one case where the guy signs an interspousal transfer, giving her 100% of the house, and it was notarized and all of this stuff. And then he says, I signed it under duress. She withheld sex from me, and her mom was pressuring me into signing it. And then it's like, that was his literal defense in court. It didn't work out.
There's so many other reasons why you sign a interspousal.
He would have done a lot better. He would have had a better chance at just saying that, oh, well, we did it because her credit was better than mine.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that happens all the time. And then you're relying on equitable principles for the judge to not do something so unconscionable to award the entire house to you when you guys clearly were pooling your resources together. And so, but no, he went with withholding sex fra. He was pro per. Yeah. He would have been really helped by having an attorney in that moment. But do not. If your divorcing partner has an attorney, do not be so egotistical as to suggest that you are going to be able to hold your own against this attorney. They know things that you don't know. They know the rules that you don't know. They know how to keep all of your evidence out that you want to show the judge, and they know how to present it in a way that hits all of the main notes according to the family code or the laws of your state. And so do not put yourself at that severe disadvantage. Get yourself an attorney, especially if he has one. And most attorneys will give you free consultations, even the expensive ones. Because what, you want to have a 1 hour conversation about your case? I'll do it. I'll do it for free. Sometimes I'll do it right on the phone. They'll call, oh, I was just wondering if I could schedule an appointment. Well, tell me what's going on. And then we'll have like this 30-minute conversation. And so just call around. Advice is free sometimes. So let us move on from this one and move into this doozy. All right. This will be the last one.
Doozy.
Yeah.
See from here, it's long. Oh my.
All right. My husband and I have been separated for almost a year. He is 35. I'm 33. We have been together since we were 21 and 19, respectively. He is a recovering addict. He's never worked. I've supported him for all but 2 of the years we were together. He's stolen from me. He's cheated on me and was physically abusive, verbally and mentally. I got fed up after we had our son, who was now 3. He tried to unalive me twice. Once while holding my son. Right before our separation, I did step out of our marriage, which ended it fully. All right. However, this man goes above and beyond to make my life miserable. Our son has autism. He can't be left with just anyone, so finding daycare was a struggle. He refuses to help with daycare expenses. I pay for my son's medical, dental, vision, insurance through work. And I will add to that my daughter, who was diagnosed autistic, got kicked out of like 2 different preschools. I remember we had her into one preschool and they just said, we cannot with Olivia. And she's attacking the other kids. Whether or not she was doing that, I don't know. But my non-autistic kid, Evelyn, got kicked out of the same school because she allegedly bit another kid that took her Legos or something. And at that point, I was like, are you guys, I mean, isn't that not in common with toddlers?
Yes,
but
it's pretty common.
Yeah, so she gets kicked out of this other one. So we take her to this more expensive Christian style daycare.
Okay.
And then I remember taking a tour of the facility, and they're like, so our method of discipline, and they go on to talk about, we try to integrate biblical principles into teaching these toddlers the rules of stuff. And neither one of myself nor my wife are all that particularly religious. And yeah, whatever, it's fine. Probably good behavioral foundation. Wasn't that big of a deal. They had like a chickens, and they would do like projects, and we really liked it. But then their disciplinary methods were, when one of the toddlers step out of line, we have this square, and it was literally like this red masking tape, a square on the floor. And they have to stand there and think about what they did and how they could have improved their behavior. And I'm thinking like, so what's keeping them in the square?
I know.
And my daughter would have been like, what, 2 or 3 at the time? I don't know, but she got kicked out of that one too. It just got, Olivia's a bit much, and we're having to devote all this extra attention to her because she won't follow directions. So she got kicked out of that one too. And then ultimately we had to get her ABA therapy in home because that was the only way she wasn't going to get kicked out of a place. We still needed daycare. I was working, my wife was working. And at that time she wasn't even working from home. She was actually working at a place. And so, yeah, it was expensive. ABA care was expensive. Daycare was expensive. And, let alone for one child, she has 2 children. I think she said 2, or am I just misremembering that? Oh, she says we have a son. Okay.
The 3-year-old.
Yeah, well, it's still expensive. It's probably like a $1,500, a couple $1,000 a month. It's not cheap. So especially ABA kids, there's only so many places you could take them, especially if they're like 3. And I don't know the extent of autism. I mean, luckily for Olivia, I mean, you look at her right now, she's like a normal child, but there's some that are very clearly severely impaired by their autism.
Yes.
And it's just a different.
There's like, I have had a lot of conservatorship cases with autistic children that they're nonverbal, so completely. And there's like a big range. And I don't know if you've ever seen on Netflix Love on the Spectrum.
Yes.
So you can see there like the different levels.
Yes. I watched that show.
Yeah.
I remember watching that show and just being horrified. Because when that show came out, I want to say that was when Olivia was just diagnosed, and I didn't know if she was going to be nonverbal. Because at that point, she was not talking. She was not hitting any of her benchmarks for verbal anything. And so, but now she talks all the time. I mean, she's like a little walking dictionary. And she picks up on stuff that, I mean, she just got a brilliant ability to focus while it doesn't look like she's focusing on stuff. Like my mom was telling me about how she was listening to why people's hands and feet wrinkle in the bathtub and some like random show that she was listening to on PBS or something. And then Olivia was in the bathtub and she was like reciting some of the finer points. And I was like, just shocked that she picked up on that. I'm not saying my kid's a super genius. I'm just saying that sometimes she's there and it doesn't look like she's there and she's aware of everything.
Yes.
I'm very similar that way. Like my wife tells me all the time that it doesn't look like I'm listening, but I'm picking up on all this other stuff. And I very often have to like multitask. So I'm like watching something and I'm like playing chess on my phone and like the kids are doing. Either way, she picks up on that stuff. Let me move on. So she has a significant dilemma. That kind of daycare is expensive. So he only has our son from 7:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Wednesdays. Did I skip something? Oh, he refuses to pay for daycare. I pay for my son's medical, dental, vision through work. That's good. He only has our son from 7:30 to 1 p.m. on Wednesdays, 7:30 to 1 p.m. on Thursdays, and then he picks him up at 10:30 p.m. and has him until 12 p.m. on Saturday. So I guess he has an overnight from Friday to Saturday. So yeah, that's difficult. What if your husband, I want you to picture a world.
Mm-hmm.
Because you told me last week that your husband, my mom said, I've never seen a man like do as much as your husband does. You like lucked out. Like he's like doing all of these things. And you're very lucky in that regard because I've changed diapers of my daughters maybe less than 20 times.
I didn't change a diaper the first 2 weeks after I gave birth.
Oh, your wife is so lucky, man.
But
or your wife. Your husband is so,
I had a
or you were so
C-section,
lucky.
Yeah, I was like, I mean, I can't. And
This was the contract I had with my wife.
yeah,
I say it was a verbal contract that was enforceable.
verbal contract.
I was like, hey, if we had a boy, I would change all the diapers, but it's girls. And so that's what happened. Hey.
And that's very typical because I have a friend and it's exactly the same. They have a boy, a girl. He helps with the boy, changing diapers, everything.
Yeah.
But he doesn't do it with the girl.
But there's like an inappropriateness to that I think that most men feels like,
Yeah.
I shouldn't be changing these diapers. Like, you know what? Only women know hygiene for women like women. I don't know. I mean, I could learn, but still, I'm like your dad. I'm not going to, here, you do this. So,
At least in my eyes, like, and I think also in my husband's eyes, when they're so little, it's okay. And then it's the inappropriateness starts like at a certain age, I guess.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I've experienced that with my eldest. My eldest is 17. At some point, we used to go like back when I was a single dad. One of our things would like we would go to the drive-in, like the drive up and like the old school we would do that. And then she would always like to sit on my lap and like watch the movies or whatever. Yeah. And around like 5 or 6 years old or 7, I can't recall specifically, but there was definitely a time where it's just not a thing anymore, you know? And it happens organically.
Exactly.
And it's not a big deal. But there's always this weirdness. Like, why am I changing the diapers? Also, I don't want to see all this. Hey, if it was a boy, I would be responsible for all of it, but it is not. And so therefore, I've used that line for years now.
Oh, God.
I've gotten away with it.
You have gotten away with it.
My wife has very graciously, let me get away with it. Never mind that. But just imagine my whole point behind this.
Yes, you were going to say.
So 5 hours on a Wednesday or 5 hours on a Thursday and then an overnight. So that means like 85% of the time, child is only with you and you're working because she has a job. And the child is autistic to some degree where it's difficult for her to find daycare that suggests behavioral problems. That is a lot to deal with by yourself.
Yeah.
And this guy, track record of doesn't work. She supported him all but 2 years of the marriage, domestic violence. He's one of those types. You know what I mean? He just never, the failure to launch types, never got a job, never progressed with life beyond high school and been living off of his wife all of these years. And so he's not going to be like, for example, your husband who's like doing all of it. And you were so blessed to have that. I can't even say that I do that for my wife. I mean, yeah, the disparity in workloads between the children, just historically, between men and women is just a lot different. Yeah. But she doesn't even have a living. And so it's just...
She has less than the standard.
Yeah. And then check this out. He works nights, I work days. So I've suggested that he keep him during the day until he has to go to school. That would really help with daycare. And I keep him at night after school and we can alternate weekends. And that way our son isn't in school when he's only with his father or me. Neither have to pay for childcare. And ultimately our son is better off, which I agree. And he's refusing to help in any way. He doesn't pick up or drop off. I am somehow responsible for both. He won't keep him extra if there's an emergency. If he is sick, he won't keep him. I miss work and have to pay extra for childcare outside of daycare. He really just does whatever he can to make things difficult when I go out of my way to accommodate him. I know legally a parent has to have the child 30% of the time to get 50-50. What is that rule?
I know. You know what? Somebody in a consultation mentioned that to me the other day, and I was like, what?
What is that?
what I heard is that apparently to keep, how did that they explain it? You have to have 30% or more of physical custody in order to actually have real 50-50 legal custody. Because if you have less than 30, you can move away with the child.
That's nonsensical. Well, that's not a thing in California.
I know, but somebody mentioned that to me the other day. I was like, oh, like I never heard of this before. So this is the second time that I hear it.
I don't know. Maybe it's a thing in some other state, but I've never heard of that rule. It doesn't exist in California. I can tell you that. And yeah, 50-50 is 50-50. And what's more is in California, they don't give a shit about percentage. I mean, they do for child support calculations, but for custody, they don't go by percentages. What days can you realistically have the child? And we go by dates and times and give me a schedule and we adopt a schedule that comes out to a percentage. But the 30% rule, I've never heard of that rule before. Okay, so he talks to me like a dog, tries to make up new rules. This morning I brought my son to his door. He was banging and crying to get in, and his father wouldn't answer the door because he's not at my beck and call. I would prefer not to have to go to court, but I don't see any way around this. Please help.
Yeah.
Well, let me just start off by saying that your ex-husband is a piece of shit. 100% up and down. His value as a man is very small. Let me just give you a psychological profile of this guy. He is the type of guy. He's never worked, recovering addict. He was hoping in high school that, somebody was going to discover his genius and just give him all of these things that he thinks he's entitled to because he's so much smarter than everybody else, but he has severe insecurities. He has issues with responsibility. He has issues with ego. And the fact that you have been able to hold that family down for as long as you did greatly diminishes his ego and emasculates him in a way that deeply hurts him to the point where he lashes out and treats you this way, which extends to your children because you are so much more attentive to your children than you ever were to him. Because what reason has he ever given you to be attentive to him? I mean, if you had a husband that was chipping in and was like holding his weight, maybe he wasn't making as much as you, but he was working. He was out there busting his ass, aspiring to be something, aspiring to contribute, as opposed to waiting around for somebody to discover his genius. I'd imagine that you would treat him a lot better, but the fact that he's putting you down and talking to you like a dog and treating you such a way, the mother of his children and his children such a way, because it's the only way that he could establish any form of dominance, because it certainly wouldn't come on its own merit. It has nothing to do more than the destruction of his ego over the years of watching you be the breadwinner while he rots away. And he's drowning all of that in abusive substances. What substance? I don't know. Marijuana, meth, heroin, pick one. Doesn't matter. He's letting himself rot. He's rotting from the inside out. And that rot is extending to you and your son. He's a piece of shit. And there's no going around that. I'm not so quick to crucify men like that. I'm not so quick to crucify anybody like that. But if you were my mom, if you were my sister, well, if you were my mom, we would handle this a different kind of way. If you were a family member, if you were a friend, I would be telling you to get out of that. Matter of fact, let's make him a deal. Let's make him a deal. I'll tell you what, why don't you just go away? Why don't you just abandon your family since we're such a burden to you? He's probably not going to take that because it's even more further destruction of his ego, but in the hopes that maybe he latches on to that because then he doesn't have to see what a piece of shit he has. And he's reminded constantly because he has this beautiful son that he has, this beautiful wife that's taking care of and holding down what he could never hold down because he never tried. Is there reasons for that? Maybe, I don't know. His daddy didn't teach him how to be a man properly. Maybe he had attachment issues with his mom. Maybe his mom didn't hug him enough. Maybe he got bullied in school. Maybe he grew up as like the star athlete and everybody stopped giving a shit about it once he graduated from high school, and then there was nothing left for him to conquer. He was an early bloomer, and that was the peak sophomore year of high school. Varsity championship game. He's literally turned into Al Bundy. And of course I'm speculating, and but listen, there's a lot of single women out there like you that exist with men like that. I will always defend a man that is imperfect, that knows he's imperfect, but strives to be a part of his children's lives because he believes it's important on some level. I'm always willing to work with that. But what you are describing to me, assuming that there is not any pushback to that, assuming, because I'm obviously not getting this story from him.
Mm-hmm.
What you are describing is like the lowest of the low.
Yes.
There's nothing redeeming about that. Assuming he's doing all of that so you get out. And furthermore, you should have called law enforcement on multiple occasions, but you didn't for whatever reasons I'm not going to judge you for. But he is not a guy that you should ever, ever again rely on reasonably for help. And your reliance on him for daycare, as much sense as that makes logically, he's not going to be there for you. He's not going to be there for you today. He's 35 years old. He's not changing anytime soon. And guess what? For this guy, it is all downhill from here. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that he's not the most attractive of men. And I preface that on saying that he has a substance abuse problem and he's starting to age and he's 35, and most addicts do not take care of themselves. They don't keep themselves in shape. And so it's rapidly going to decline. It's going to go quick. He's going to start losing his hair. He's going to start graying. He's going to start getting a belly. He's going to start... His imperfections are going to be so pronounced, he's not going to be of any worth to you whatsoever. And so you just have to start getting it across your mind that you are in this by yourself. And though your prospects are not the best, because you are going literally a single mom with a child who is autistic, that has an ex who is the perpetrator of domestic violence with substance abuse issues, that is probably on that basis unpredictable. Having to navigate the world of finding another mate potentially and getting somebody to buy into all of that. That is so difficult. Ileana, I got to tell you, when I met my wife, I was basically a single dad. But for a man, it's like, oh, you're such a good father. It was like this major selling. When I was living the single life, it was like, oh, you're such a good dad. Let me buy your child gifts. Like people literally bring my daughter gifts. It was like, you were not meeting my daughter.
Yes, exactly.
What is wrong with you? And, not that they were ill-intentioned or anything, but when a man confronts a single woman with a child, your value to that man drops. They will have sex with you, but they will not get in a relationship with you unless a number of things happen. What those things are is independent to every single man. And so I greatly sympathize with her. But let me just bring up the example of my mom, who was on the show last week.
Yes.
And everybody was like, hey, your mom's beauty secrets, you should bring her back on. And so I was like, hey, maybe this show isn't about makeup tutorials. It's not really our jam. But, people really like to bring on the show. But my mom, she had me when she was 16 years old. She was a single mom. And then she had my brother at 19 with my dad. And so she had two kids at 19. They got married around that time, like when they were 19. They got divorced because my dad was an idiot. I mean, he was a dumbass. He was 19. He was running around doing stupid things, whatever, doesn't matter, over, done with. But she had this whole haul of kids, and she is right now married to an attorney who makes his own money, that does very well for himself, that took on the role of being stepdad to all of her children. Not me, I was much older at that point. But like, they have a daughter together, and they're doing very well. It's out there. You can put yourself out there. It's going to be harder for you, for sure, because the package that you present is not ideal. But you got to stop at some point relying on this man. And I'll tell you what, my mom at some point stopped relying on my dad because he was a dumbass. And it was the best decision that she ever made. As much as I love my father, he was not equipped to deal with what he was charged to deal with. And I don't blame him for that. It is what it is. He was a kid trying to play grown folks' business. But she had to cut ties, and she did what she had to do, and she was successful in finding somebody that would respect her the way that she deserved to be respected. So she has to give up on this guy. Whatever he's willing to give you, great. He's your child's father. That's never going to change. He's always going to be around in some capacity, but you have to shift your mindset. No, he's not going to pay for the health insurance. No, he's not going to pay for the daycare. He's not even going to open the door for your 3-year-old child when he's banging on the door because he's not at his beck and call. What kind of piece of shit would say something like that? A man that is willing to that degree embarrass a child and a mother is a deeply wounded man. And at 35 years old, you cannot expect that he's ever going to recover. Is it possible? Sure. But I'm not sticking around to find out the end of the story. Let's just assume that he's never going to get better. And if by some miracle he does, then fine. Good for him. But you're not dependent on him anymore. You must take up the role as single mom. And you know what? You got to stop crying about it. And I know that might be hard to say. That might be hard to hear. But nobody's coming to help you. You need to get used to the idea that you're doing this by yourself. And resolve yourself to the perseverance that is required to successfully navigate the waters that are facing you. And only when you find it within yourself, the strength within yourself, because it ain't coming from that dumb, are you going to be able to be what your son needs you to be, because he's not going to get it from his dad. Your son is going to have to learn how to be a man through you. Is it unfair? Yeah, but nobody cares. And it's at this point, Ileana, that I bring up the point about how therapy damages people because they think that, oh, I feel triggered, I feel sad, and so therefore I have an excuse. Bullshit. Talk to me about all of that stupid shit. Dominic, bleep me out. Talk to me about all of that stupid stuff after you do handle your responsibilities, and then we could talk about how much it sucks. I'm not going to say that it doesn't suck. I'm not going to say that you shouldn't go to therapy to fix your emotions, to navigate your emotions, but do not let that be an excuse to prevent you from being the mom that your son needs you to be, because your son is going to see that piece of shit and they're going to resolve themselves to never turn out that way, never treat a woman that way, never treat a child that way, never let yourself go the way that his dad has. And he has the potential to be something great, but it's up to you to cultivate that in him. And if you can do that, you can turn him into something that he could be proud of, that you will be proud of. And you're no longer reliant on this piece of abuser, because he's no longer in the equation. He's no longer a variable. If he's an invariable, he's not an important variable. He's a manageable variable. What do you have to say about that, Ileana?
Well, I know you focus, of course, a lot on whether or not she should just separate, I guess, and just not rely on him. And I do agree, she needs to stop relying on him. That's something that's very common. I think I get a lot of consultations or clients where they want the other person to pull their weight, and unfortunately there's not that many legal ways to make them change and be responsible. Like
you can't force somebody to be a dad.
Exactly.
You just can't.
Now, but from the entire rambling in there,
my rambling or her rambling? Because I know
her rambling.
I definitely rambled.
What I don't understand is what was her question? Like, what does she need advice? Like,
that's what I'm getting at. Like, what do you want us to say? That I could get like a judge to order him to be a good dad?
Yeah, like
or
there's
not
no
be
way to do that. I mean, you can maybe put the child in some sort of child care and then maybe ask for child support and include childcare in there, and then he's gonna be upset. But if he's not helping you, then you got to pay for the help, and he's going to pull his weight with the help, I mean, with payment. But other than that, I don't know what other legal advice.
Let's just assume that we get her a child support order where he's forced to pay daycare.
Mm-hmm.
What's the guarantee that he's going to pay? Well, then we'll bring him up for back pay and arrears. Okay, what's the guarantee he's going to pay that?
That's the only thing, yeah.
Which is why my logical conclusion is, hey, sometimes you just got to cut your losses.
Mm-hmm.
Stop relying on him so heavily for anything. Expect exactly zero from him. And let him wither off into the sunset if that's what he's going to do. You were 33 years old. You were not that old to give up and give in to a piece of shit like that. There are men out there that are willing to step up for you. And I got to be honest with you. I would not advise a man to get involved in your situation until you hit certain benchmarks, and only after certain things happen in a relationship. So you got to pull yourself together. And the first step is writing off that guy forever. And in the process of doing that, relying only on yourself. And I don't want you to feel sorry for yourself, and I know that you don't. But I don't want you to use this scenario as an excuse about why you can't excel. You get yourself together, you get your finances right, you depend on yourself only, and you go out and you live your life and resolve yourself to raising this child all by yourself, because that is your charge for the next 15 years, maybe longer. So take care of yourself and stop relying on this guy. That's my advice. There's no legal advice that I could give you that's going to fix him as a man. That's just something that's deeply seated within him. But you know what? He could be a piece of shit all by himself. Let him. You move on to greener pastures. And that's all I had to say about that. Ileana, any closing thoughts?
No, I'm just hungry.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to wrap up this segment of Family Law After Dark. We will see you guys all next week when I don't know what topic we're going to do, but we're going to do something with a brand new case, brand new scenarios, brand new highlights, brand new stuff, and of course another segment of After Dark. But we will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.